I can't do this anymore. Those 5 words, signed with trembling hands across a candlelit table, would shatter what could have been the perfect first date. Lena Parker had spent 37 years building walls around her heart, walls constructed from every pitying glance, every relationship that crumbled the moment her hearing aids came into view, every person who saw her disability before they saw her. Tonight, sitting across from Evan Brooks in Romano's restaurant, those walls were about to come crashing down in the most unexpected way. But before we get to how 3 8-year-old girls changed everything, let me ask you to stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Friday evening crowd at Romano's hummed with the familiar symphony of clinking silverware, muted conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter from the bar area. Evan Brooks sat at table 7, the small corner booth he'd specifically requested, running his thumb along the condensation on his water glass for the 3rd time in as many minutes. His navy blazer suddenly felt too tight across his shoulders, and he reminded himself to breathe. It had been 4 years since Michelle died, 4 years since he'd sat across from a woman and felt anything remotely resembling nervousness. "You need to get back out there," his sister Caroline had insisted 2 weeks ago, cornering him in his own kitchen while his triplet daughters decorated cookies at the table. "Michelle would want you to be happy, Evan. She'd want you to live again, not just exist." He'd argued, of course. The girls needed stability. His construction business demanded focus. He wasn't ready. He'd never be ready. But Caroline, stubborn as ever, had already planted the seed. And when she mentioned that her colleague, Lena, was amazing, brilliant with kids, and just your type, something in his chest had loosened enough to say yes. Now, watching the restaurant's entrance with a mixture of anticipation and dread, Evan questioned everything about this decision. The door opened and a woman stepped inside. Lena Parker paused in the entryway, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that somehow made her green eyes more striking. She wore a burgundy sweater dress that suggested she'd put thought into this without trying too hard, and her hands clutched a small purse like it was a life preserver. For a moment, she just stood there, scanning the restaurant with an expression Evan recognized all too well, the look of someone preparing for disappointment. Their eyes met across the room, and something electric passed between them. Recognition, maybe, though they'd never met. Or perhaps it was just the shared understanding that they were both terrified of whatever came next. Evan stood, raising his hand in a small wave. Lena's lips curved into a tentative smile as she navigated between tables toward him. As she drew closer, he noticed the subtle hearing aids tucked behind her ears, nearly invisible against her skin. Caroline had mentioned Lena was deaf, had asked if he'd be comfortable with that, and he'd almost laughed at the question. "Hi," Lena said as she reached the table, her voice carrying the slightly different cadence of someone who couldn't hear their own speech. "You must be Evan." "I am," he replied, making sure she could see his face clearly as he spoke. "It's really nice to meet you, Lena." He pulled out her chair, and she blinked in surprise before accepting the gesture. As she settled in, Evan caught the briefest flicker of something across her face. Suspicion, maybe, or disbelief. Like she couldn't quite trust this moment to be real. "Caroline talks about you all the time," Lena said once they were both seated. "I'm pretty sure I know your entire life story already." Evan chuckled. "I apologize for my sister. She means well, but subtle isn't exactly in her vocabulary." "No," Lena agreed, her smile widening. "It definitely isn't. She's been trying to set this up for 6 months." 6 months? Evan's eyebrows shot up. "She told me 2 weeks. She probably thought you'd run if you knew how long she'd been planning this." Lena's fingers traced the edge of her menu. "I almost did. Run, I mean." The honesty caught him off guard in the best way. "What made you stay?" Lena was quiet for a moment, considering. "Curiosity, I guess. And Caroline can be very persuasive when she wants to be. That's the understatement of the century." Their server approached. Marcus, according to his name tag, a young man with an eager smile who immediately launched into the evening's specials. Evan watched Lena's face as she tried to follow along, saw the slight furrow between her brows as Marcus spoke too quickly, turned his head too much. Without thinking, Evan gently interrupted. "Could you slow down just a bit?" he asked Marcus kindly. "And maybe face us when you're speaking? My friend needs to read your lips." Marcus's eyes widened with understanding, and he immediately adjusted. repeating the specials more slowly and maintaining eye contact with both of them. When he finished, Lena's expression had shifted. That suspicious look was back, mixed with something else Evan couldn't quite read. After they'd ordered, chicken marsala for her, ribeye for him, Lena folded her hands on the table and looked at him directly. "You knew," she said. It wasn't a question. "Caroline mentioned you're deaf, yes. And you still came." The way she said it, with such quiet disbelief, made Evan's heart ache. "Of course I still came. Why wouldn't I?" Lena's laugh was short, humorless. "Most men don't. Or they come once, realize it's too much work, and I never hear from them again. Pun not intended." "Then most men are idiots," Evan said simply. She studied him for a long moment, those green eyes searching for something, pity, maybe, or false kindness. Whatever she was looking for, she didn't seem to find it, because eventually she relaxed slightly into her chair. "Tell me about your daughters," she said, changing the subject. "Caroline says you have triplets?" Evan's entire demeanor transformed at the mention of his girls. "I do. Sophie, Emma, and Grace. They're 8, and they're the best thing that ever happened to me. Also the most exhausting thing, but mostly the best." "That's a lot of energy in one household." "You have no idea." He pulled out his phone, scrolling to his photos. "This is Sophie. She's the oldest by 4 minutes and never lets her sisters forget it. Total perfectionist, reads at a 6th grade level, and thinks she's basically a co-parent." The photo showed a serious-looking girl with dark hair and braids, holding up a spelling test marked with a perfect score. "This is Emma, middle child, the peacemaker. She's convinced she's going to be a veterinarian and brings home every stray animal in a 5-mile radius. We currently have 2 cats, a dog, 3 hamsters, and a goldfish named Sir Bubbles." Lena laughed, a genuine sound that made Evan's chest warm. Emma's photo showed a gap-toothed grin and arms full of a squirming puppy. "And this is Grace, the baby of the family by 7 minutes. She's the wild card, artistic, impulsive, and has absolutely no fear. Last month she decided she wanted to be a tightrope walker and strung a rope between 2 trees in our backyard. Nearly gave me a heart attack." Grace's photo captured her mid-leap off a swing set, face full of pure joy. "They're beautiful," Lena said softly, and Evan heard the weight behind those words. "You must be very proud." "Every single day." He paused, then added, "They're actually the reason I said yes to this date." Lena's eyebrows rose. "Your 8-year-old daughters encouraged you to date?" "Not exactly." Evan set his phone down, his expression growing more serious. "After their mother died, I kind of shut down for a while. Went through the motions, took care of them, worked, but I wasn't really living. About 6 months ago, Sophie cornered me. And when Sophie corners you, there's no escape, and told me I wasn't happy anymore, said Mom wouldn't want me to be sad forever." She sounds wise beyond her years. She is, terrifyingly so. Evan's smile was bittersweet. "So I've been trying to be present again, to let people in. Caroline offering to set me up felt like a test I was finally ready to take." Lena was quiet, absorbing this. "I'm sorry about your wife." "Thank you. It's been 4 years and some days are harder than others, but we're okay. The girls are resilient." Their food arrived, and for several minutes they ate in comfortable silence. Evan watched Lena carefully cut her chicken into precise pieces, noticed how she kept her eyes on him whenever he spoke, how she positioned herself to see as much of the restaurant as possible. Survival instincts, he recognized. Ways of navigating a world not built for her. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said suddenly. "Anything. Why are you being so normal about this?" Evan set down his fork. "About what?" "About me. About—" She gestured vaguely at her hearing aids. "This. Most people either treat me like I'm made of glass or like I'm stupid. You're doing neither, and honestly, it's throwing me off." "Would you prefer I treat you like you're made of glass or stupid?" Evan asked with a slight smile. "No, Lena huffed out a frustrated breath. "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant." Evan leaned forward slightly. "You want to know if I'm faking it. If this is some kind of act that'll fall apart once the novelty wears off. Lena's silence was answer enough. I'm not faking anything, Evan said quietly. I'm just treating you like a person I'm getting to know, because that's what you are. A person who happens to be deaf, not a deaf person who happens to exist. Something flickered across Lena's face. Hope, maybe, or fear. You'd be surprised how rare that attitude is. I probably wouldn't, actually. They fell into easier conversation after that. Lena told him about her work at Meadowbrook Elementary, about the 12 special needs students in her classroom who challenged and amazed her daily. She talked about learning ASL as a teenager after a car accident stole her hearing at 16, about the grueling years of speech therapy and adaptation, about rebuilding an entire identity from scratch. Evan listened, really listened, asking questions that showed he understood the difference between hearing her story and truly comprehending it. He shared more about his girls, about the chaos of single parenting, about how he'd learned to braid hair through YouTube videos and still couldn't figure out how to get the tangles out of doll hair. 20 minutes passed like 20 seconds. Lena found herself laughing more than she had in months, found herself relaxing into the conversation in a way that felt dangerously close to hope. Evan's smile reached his eyes when he talked about his daughters, and there was something solid about him, something steady that made her want to trust him. And that's when the panic hit. Because Lena had been here before, had felt this spark, this connection, this dangerous flutter of possibility, and every single time, without exception, it had ended the same way, with disappointment, with rejection, with the crushing realization that no one actually wanted to deal with the reality of loving someone who couldn't hear them say, "I love you," in the dark. Her phone buzzed on the table, a text from her friend Rachel checking in. Lena glanced at it, then at Evan, who was in the middle of a story about Grace trying to teach the dog to play fetch with her art supplies. His face was animated, genuine, and completely unguarded. "He's gonna leave," the voice in her head whispered. "Maybe not tonight, maybe not next week, but eventually. They always do." "Anyway, we're still finding paintbrushes in weird places," Evan was saying. "Last week I found one in my work boot, and I still have no idea how it got there. Lena, you okay?" She realized she'd zoned out, was staring at him with an expression she couldn't quite control. "I'm fine, sorry, just distracted." But she wasn't fine. The walls she'd spent years building were starting to crack, and the fear of what might rush in through those cracks was overwhelming. Because this felt different. Evan felt different, and that made it so much worse, because when he eventually realized she was too much work, too complicated, too damaged, it would hurt in ways she wasn't sure she could survive. "You sure?" Evan's brow furrowed with concern. "We can take a break from talking if you need to." "No, I just..." Lena pressed her palms flat against the table, trying to ground herself. "This is really nice." "But," Evan prompted gently. "But it won't last." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "This, whatever this is, it feels good now, but it won't last because it never does." Evan went very still. "What do you mean?" And suddenly, Lena couldn't breathe, couldn't sit in this booth pretending that this was anything other than a prelude to inevitable heartbreak. Years of rejection, of being someone's charity case, of watching interest fade into obligation, came crashing down on her all at once. "I mean," her voice cracked. "I mean, you're being wonderful right now, Evan. You're saying all the right things, doing all the right things, but eventually you'll realize that dating me isn't just about dinner conversation. It's about repeating yourself constantly. It's about awkward moments when I can't understand you in loud places. It's about people staring at us because I talk differently. It's about 1,000 tiny inconveniences you haven't even considered yet. Lena, and you'll be patient at first," she continued, the words pouring out like water through a broken dam. "Because you're a good person. I can tell you're a good person. But one day you'll be tired or stressed or in a hurry, and having to slow down for me will feel like an anchor, and you'll start to resent it. Resent me." "That's not..." "It is." Lena's hands were shaking now, and it's exactly what happens. Every time. I've been through this before, Evan, multiple times, and I can't do it again. I can't sit here and let myself hope that you'll be different when I know that eventually you'll look at me and see a complication instead of a person. The restaurant noise seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in this bubble of raw honesty and rising panic. Evan reached across the table, but Lena pulled her hands back before he could touch them. "I'm not them," Evan said firmly. "Whoever hurt you before, whoever made you feel like you're too much, I'm not them, Lena. You say that now, I say that now, and I'll say it tomorrow, and the day after that." His voice was steady, certain. "I understand that you've been burned. I get it. But you can't punish me for other people's failures." Lena laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself." "By running before anything even starts?" "Yes." The admission cost her something. "Because at least this way I control when it ends. At least this way I don't have to watch you fall out of love with me piece by piece until there's nothing left." Evan's expression shifted to something that looked painfully like understanding. "You really believe that's inevitable?" "I've lived it, multiple times." Lena stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. "I'm sorry, Evan. You seem like a genuinely good person, and your daughters are lucky to have you, but I can't do this. I thought I could, but I can't." "Lena, wait." But she was already moving, navigating between tables with practiced efficiency, heading for the exit like it was a lifeline. She could feel Evan's eyes on her back, could imagine the disappointment and confusion on his face, and it made her move faster. "No one actually wants to date someone like me," she thought as she pushed through the restaurant's front door. "No one ever really has." The cool evening air hit her face, and Lena sucked in a breath, trying to calm the racing of her heart. She'd done the right thing, saved herself from future pain, protected what was left of her battered heart. So why did it feel like she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life? Behind her, inside Romano's, Evan sat frozen at table 7, staring at the half-eaten meals and the empty chair across from him. His mind was reeling, trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand how a date that had been going so well could fall apart so completely. But beneath the confusion, beneath the disappointment, was something else, something that felt uncomfortably like recognition, because he'd seen that kind of fear before. Had held it in his arms during Michelle's final months, when she'd tried to push him away to spare him the pain of losing her. Had fought against it then, and won, and built a beautiful life for however long they'd been given. Lena was running from pain, not from him. She was so convinced she wasn't worthy of love that she'd sabotage the possibility before it could sabotage her. And Evan, who'd spent 4 years learning to live again, who'd been taught by his late wife that love was worth fighting for even when it was hard, couldn't just let her walk away believing she was unlovable. He pulled out his wallet, threw down enough cash to cover the bill and a generous tip, and stood to follow her. But before he could take 2 steps, 3 small figures came barreling through the restaurant's side entrance, the one that led from the private event room where they were supposed to be safely contained at Emma's friend's birthday party. Sophie, Emma, and Grace Brooks, dressed in matching party dresses and looks of absolute determination, screeched to a halt in front of their father. "We saw her leave," Sophie announced, her hands already moving in sign language even as she spoke. "The pretty lady from your date. She looked sad." "Girls, what are you doing out here?" Evan glanced frantically between his daughters and the door Lena had just exited through. "You're supposed to be at Madison's party." "We snuck out," Grace said matter-of-factly. "Emma saw you through the window and we wanted to spy." "Grace!" Emma elbowed her sister. "We weren't spying, we were observing." "That's literally the same thing," Sophie interjected, then turned her sharp gaze on her father. "Why did she leave, Dad? Did you mess it up?" Evan ran a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, sweetheart." "Did you tell her about Mom?" Emma asked, her voice soft. The question stopped Evan cold. "What?" "About how Mom was deaf too," Sophie clarified. "About how you know sign language and everything. Because if you didn't tell her, she probably thinks you're just being nice like everyone else who's just being nice and doesn't actually understand." Evan stared at his 8-year-old daughter, wondering when exactly she'd become so perceptive. "We heard you talking earlier," Emma admitted, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "About how the lady, Lena, has been hurt before. About how people treat her different." "People are dumb," Grace declared. "Mom used to say that all the time." "Language, Grace," Evan said automatically, but his heart wasn't in the correction. His daughters were right. They were absolutely right. In all the conversation, in all the getting to know you pleasantries, he'd never mentioned Michelle. Never mentioned that he didn't just understand Lena's world academically. He'd lived in it for 15 years. You have to go after her, Dad, Sophie said urgently, before she gets too far. I can't leave you three alone. Madison's mom is right there, Sophie pointed toward the event room. We'll go right back to the party, we promise. But you have to go get her. Evan looked at his daughters. These three fierce, brilliant, impossible children who'd somehow inherited their mother's wisdom along with her stubbornness, and made a decision. Stay together, he ordered. Go straight back to the party. I'll come get you in 30 minutes. An hour, Sophie negotiated. Give you time to fix things. 45 minutes. Deal. Sophie stuck out her hand and they shook on it solemnly. Evan was halfway to the door when Emma called out, Dad, wait! He turned back. All three girls were grinning now, that troublemaker expression he knew all too well. What if, Emma said slowly, we came with you? Absolutely not. Just to help, Grace interrupted. We're really good at helping. You're really good at causing chaos, Evan corrected. Mom was deaf, Sophie said, her expression turning serious. We know sign language. We know what it's like. Maybe we can help her understand that you're not like the other guys, that we're not like other families. Evan opened his mouth to argue, to be the responsible parent who kept his daughters out of his dating life to maintain appropriate boundaries. But then he thought about Lena's face in those final moments, the absolute conviction that she wasn't worth the effort, the bone-deep belief that rejection was inevitable. And he thought about Michelle, who would have marched after Lena herself, who would have signed fiercely about how love didn't count costs and hearts didn't come with instruction manuals. 30 minutes, he said finally, and if Madison's mom asks, you tell her I gave permission. The girls whooped with victory, already running for the door. Outside, Lena had made it to the parking lot, fumbling with her car keys with shaking hands. The tears she'd been holding back were finally falling, hot and shameful against her cheeks. Stupid. She was so stupid. Caroline had been right about Evan. He was kind, genuine, exactly the kind of man she should want. And she'd ruined it because she couldn't get out of her own way, couldn't stop expecting rejection long enough to accept something good. Her phone buzzed. Caroline, how's it going? Lena almost laughed. How was it going? She just had a panic attack in the middle of the best date she'd had in years and fled like a coward. That's how it was going. She was typing out a response when she heard footsteps running toward her. Multiple sets of footsteps. Lena turned, expecting maybe restaurant staff or other patrons, and instead found herself facing three small girls in party dresses, all of them slightly out of breath and staring at her with unnervingly intense expressions. She said, taking a step back. Can I help you? The oldest one, Sophie, she remembered from Evan's photos, stepped forward and began to sign. Please don't leave yet, her hand said, moving with a fluency that made Lena's breath catch. My dad is not like the others. He understands. Lena's mouth fell open. These were Evan's daughters, his 8-year-old daughters who apparently knew sign language and had just chased her down in a parking lot. Your dad sent you? She signed back, too shocked to speak. No, Emma signed, stepping forward to join her sister. We came because we wanted to, because you look sad and we know what that feels like. The third sister, Grace, didn't sign. Instead, she walked right up to Lena and took her hand. You're really pretty, Grace said, her voice carrying the careful enunciation of someone who'd been taught to speak clearly for the benefit of others. And you made our dad smile. He doesn't smile like that a lot anymore. Girls, I appreciate this, but our mom was deaf, Sophie signed, cutting her off. Dad learned sign language for her, before they even got married. He learned it because he loved her, not because he had to. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Lena stared at these three children, processing what they'd just told her. Your mom, she said slowly, making sure they could see her face. Your mom was deaf? All three nodded. She died 4 years ago, Emma signed, her small hands moving with a gravity that seemed too old for her years. Cancer. It was really hard. I'm so sorry, Lena whispered. Dad still signs with us sometimes, Sophie continued. When we're sad or when words are too hard. He says it was Mom's gift to all of us, a way of talking that doesn't need sound. Lena felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, opening. These children, these beautiful, honest children, were standing in a parking lot telling her that their father hadn't just tolerated their mother's deafness. He'd embraced it, learned it, made it part of their family's identity. Why didn't he tell me? The question came out as barely more than a breath. Because you were already running, said a voice behind the girls. Evan appeared, his hands shoved in his pockets, looking sheepish and determined in equal measure. The girls immediately moved to flank him, a united front of Brooks' family solidarity. I'm sorry, he said, meeting Lena's eyes. I should have mentioned Michelle earlier. Should have told you that I don't just understand your world. I've lived in it. But honestly, I was worried you'd think I was only interested because you reminded me of her. And that's not true. Lena couldn't speak, couldn't move. You don't remind me of Michelle, Evan continued. You're your own person with your own story. But I'd be lying if I said that your being deaf makes you less attractive to me. If anything, it's the opposite. Because I know what I'm signing up for. I know the challenges, the frustrations, the beautiful moments of connection that happen without sound. And I know, Lena, that none of it makes you less worthy of love. The tears were falling freely now, and Lena didn't bother to wipe them away. Dad's telling the truth, Sophie signed. He hasn't been this excited about anything since Mom died. We heard him singing this morning. Singing. He never sings. That's because I can't carry a tune to save my life, Evan said with a small smile. Michelle used to say it was her one relief about being deaf. She couldn't hear me in the shower. Despite everything, Lena laughed. It came out watery and broken, but it was real. This is crazy, she said, looking at Evan, at his daughters, at this impossible situation. You brought your children to chase down your date. I brought my children to tell you the truth I didn't get a chance to say inside. Evan's expression softened. That you're not a complication, Lena. You're not a burden or a charity case or someone who needs fixing. You're just you. And from what I've seen tonight, just you is pretty damn wonderful. We think you're wonderful too, Emma signed, her smile gap-toothed and genuine. And we're really good judges of character. Our school counselor said so. Grace tugged on Lena's hand again, demanding attention. Will you come back inside, please? We're supposed to be at a party, but we want to make sure Dad doesn't mess this up. Grace! Evan's face flushed. We're not. It's true, though, Sophie interjected. You're kind of bad at dating, Dad. You told us that yourself. I said I was out of practice, not bad at it. Same thing. Watching them bicker, watching these girls defend their father while simultaneously roasting him, Lena felt something shift fundamentally inside her. Because this wasn't just Evan asking for another chance. This was a whole family, complicated and loving and utterly sincere. Standing in a parking lot at dusk, telling her she belonged. And maybe, just maybe, they were right. Okay, Lena heard herself say. All 4 Brooks family members froze. Okay, Evan repeated, hope flooding his features. Okay, Lena confirmed, her voice stronger now. I'll come back inside, we'll finish dinner, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. If this gets to be too much, if I get to be too much, you tell me. You don't just fade away or make excuses, you be honest with me. Can you do that? Evan stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I can do that. Can you promise me something too? Maybe. Promise you'll stop assuming I'm going to leave before you've given me a real chance to stay. The request hung in the air between them, terrifying and necessary. Lena thought about all the time she'd protected herself by leaving first, by building walls so high that no one could climb them. She thought about the years she'd spent alone, convinced it was safer than the alternative. And she thought about these 3 girls who'd lost their mother but still believed in love enough to chase down a stranger in a parking lot. I'll try, Lena said finally. I can't promise I won't panic again, but I'll try. That's all I'm asking. Evan held out his hand, leaving the choice to her. Lena looked at his outstretched hand, then at his daughters, all 3 watching with barely contained excitement, then back at Evan's face. Kind, patient, genuinely interested Evan, who'd learned sign language for love and still remembered it 4 years after loss. She took his hand. The girls erupted in cheers, jumping up and down in their party dresses. Sophie immediately began signing, "I told you it would work," while Emma clapped her hands in delight and Grace literally punched the air in triumph. All right, Evan laughed, squeezing Lena's hand gently before releasing it. "You three need to get back to that party before Madison's mom sends out a search party." "But we want to stay with you guys," Grace protested. "Absolutely not. This is a date, not a family outing. What if we just—" "No. But, Sophie, take your sisters back to the party. Now." The oldest Brooks daughter sighed dramatically, but nodded. "It was nice to meet you," she signed to Lena. "Take care of our dad. He's kind of clueless sometimes, but he means well." "I will," Lena signed back, surprising herself with the promise. The girls headed back toward the restaurant, whispering and giggling among themselves. At the door, all three turned and waved enthusiastically. Lena waved back, feeling like she'd just stepped into an alternate universe where first dates included parking lot interventions by third graders. "I'm sorry about that," Evan said once they were alone. "I swear I didn't plan for them to ambush you." "I know." Lena's lips twitched. "They ambushed both of us, I think." "They're nothing if not determined. Gets that from their mother." His expression turned thoughtful. "Michelle would have liked you, I think. She had a thing for strong women who didn't take anyone's crap." "Is that what I am?" "Among other things, yes." They stood there in the parking lot as evening deepened into night, the restaurant's warm light spilling out behind them. Lena felt raw, exposed, like all her carefully constructed defenses had been stripped away in the span of 20 minutes. But she also felt something else. Seen. Truly, honestly seen. Not as a disability or a project or a replacement for someone gone. Just as herself, complicated, damaged, scared, and somehow miraculously still worth fighting for. "So," Evan said after a moment, "do I get that second chance at finishing our first date? Our food's probably cold by now, but I'm pretty sure we can convince Marcus to warm it up." Lena thought about the chicken marsala waiting inside, about the conversation they'd barely started, about the 1,000 ways this could still go wrong. She thought about her history of running, of protecting herself, of choosing loneliness over risk. And then she thought about 3 girls in party dresses who believed love was worth chasing, and their father who'd learned an entire language just to say, "I love you," in a way his wife could fully understand. "Yeah," she said, surprised by her own certainty. "Yeah, you do." They walked back toward Romano's together, not quite touching, but close enough that Lena could feel the warmth of him beside her. At the door, Evan paused. "For the record," he said, "I really am terrible at dating. I'm going to make mistakes, say the wrong thing, probably step on your feet if we ever dance. But I'm going to show up, Lena. Every day, in every way I know how. That's the one thing I can promise you." Lena's throat tightened with emotion she couldn't quite name. "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Why me? Why this? You could find someone easier, someone less—" "Complicated?" Evan finished for her. "Less damaged? Less work?" He shook his head. "First of all, everyone's complicated and damaged and work. That's just being human. But second, and this is important, I'm not looking for easy, Lena. I'm looking for real. And tonight, even with the panic attack and the dramatic exit and my daughter staging an intervention, this is the most real I've felt in 4 years." The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and impossible to ignore. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Okay." Stronger now. "Let's go finish our date." Evan's smile could have powered the entire restaurant. He opened the door, and they stepped back inside together. Marcus spotted them immediately, his eyes widening in surprise and what looked like relief. He hurried over, menus in hand. "Welcome back," he said, speaking slowly and making sure they could both see his face. "Your table's still available, and I can have the kitchen remake your entrees if you'd like." "That would be perfect," Evan said. "Thank you." As they settled back into booth 7, Lena felt the eyes of other diners on them. Curiosity, mostly, maybe some judgment. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't care. Let them stare. Let them wonder. She was done shrinking herself to make others comfortable. "So," Evan said once they were seated, his eyes twinkling with humor, "where were we before the dramatic intermission?" Lena laughed, actually laughed, and it felt like breathing after being underwater too long. I think you were telling me about Grace and the paintbrush incident. Right! So there I am trying to get to a job site, and I feel something poking my toe. And just like that, they picked up where they'd left off. The conversation flowed easier this time, without the weight of Lena's unspoken fears crushing every word. She told him about her students, about the little victories and daily challenges of teaching kids who learn differently. He shared more about single parenthood, about the time all three girls got head lice simultaneously and he'd had to watch 6 hours of YouTube videos to figure out the treatment. They talked about Michelle, carefully at first, but with growing ease. About how she'd been a graphic designer who specialized in children's books. About her wicked sense of humor and terrible cooking skills. About the way she'd fought her cancer with grace and fury right up until the end. She sounds amazing, Lena said softly. She was. Evan's smile was sad but genuine. She was also stubborn as hell, and had a tendency to rearrange furniture in the middle of the night when she couldn't sleep. I'd wake up and the entire living room would be facing a different direction. That must have been disorienting. You have no idea. But it kept things interesting. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I loved her completely, Lena, and I'll always love her, in the way you love someone who shaped who you are. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and she'd be the first person to tell me to stop living in the past. Lena understood what he was saying. This wasn't about replacing someone irreplaceable. It was about having the courage to begin again, even when beginning was terrifying. Their fresh meals arrived, and they ate slowly, savoring both the food and the conversation. Evan asked about her childhood, about the accident that had taken her hearing, and listened without flinching when she described the isolation and grief of losing a sense she'd taken for granted. Do you miss it? He asked. Sound, I mean. It was a question most people were too polite or too uncomfortable to ask. Lena appreciated the directness. Sometimes, she admitted, I miss music the most. I can feel bass lines and rhythms, but melody is just gone. And I miss the sound of rain. That was always my favorite. She paused. But I don't spend a lot of time mourning what I lost. This is who I am now. This is my reality. That takes incredible strength. Or just stubbornness. She smiled. My mom says I've been stubborn since birth. Apparently I refused to cry like a normal baby. Just stared at people until they figured out what I needed. That tracks with the woman who walked out mid-date and then came back. Fair point. They lingered over dessert, tiramisu for him, chocolate lava cake for her, neither wanting the evening to end. Around them, the restaurant began to empty as the dinner rush wound down. Marcus had stopped hovering and started giving them space, clearly pleased that whatever drama had happened earlier had resolved itself. I should probably get going soon, Lena said eventually, though she made no move to stand. I have papers to grade tomorrow and a student conference Monday morning. Of course, Evan signaled for the check. Can I walk you to your car? I'd like that. Outside, the night had settled in fully, stars visible despite the parking lot lights. Lena's car was where she'd left it, her keys still clutched in her hand from her earlier panic. So, Evan said as they reached her driver's side door, would you maybe want to do this again sometime? Hopefully with less running and more dessert? Lena turned to face him, really face him, this man who'd somehow seen past every defense she'd erected. I would, but I need you to understand something first. Okay, I'm going to panic again. Maybe not next week, maybe not next month, but eventually my history is going to catch up with me and I'm going to get scared and try to push you away. And when that happens, I need you to push back. Not to fix me, but to remind me that I'm worth staying for. Evan stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could see every emotion crossing his face in the dim light. I can do that, he said, but I need you to understand something too. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to say the wrong thing or miss something important or get overwhelmed by parenting and forget to text you back. And when that happens, I need you to tell me, not assume it means I'm losing interest. Deal. They stood there for another moment, the air between them crackling with potential and possibility. I'm not going to kiss you, Evan said suddenly. Lena blinked. What? Not tonight. I want to, believe me, but I think we should take this slow. Build something real before we complicate it with physical stuff. He grinned.
Also, my daughters are absolutely watching us from the party room window right now, and I refuse to give them that kind of ammunition. Lena glanced toward the restaurant, and sure enough, 3 small faces were pressed against a window, barely visible but definitely present. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. Your daughters are menaces. I'm aware. They're also pretty incredible. That too. Lena opened her car door, then turned back. Evan? Thank you. For not giving up, for coming after me. Always, he said simply.
And somehow she believed him. She drove home that night with her heart full and her mind racing, already second-guessing and overthinking and wondering if she'd just made the best decision of her life or set herself up for the worst heartbreak yet. But beneath all the noise and fear was something else. Something fragile, but growing. Hope. And for now, that was enough. The week following their first date passed in a blur of text messages, late-night phone calls, and carefully planned second encounters that felt both thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. Lena found herself checking her phone between classes, smiling at messages from Evan that ranged from mundane updates about his construction projects to photos of his daughter's latest adventures. Sophie had apparently decided to reorganize the entire kitchen by color, Emma had brought home yet another stray cat, and Grace had convinced her sisters to help her build a fort that now occupied most of their living room. You're glowing, Rachel observed on Wednesday afternoon, cornering Lena in the teacher's lounge during lunch. Like actually glowing. What happened? Lena tried to play it cool, but the smile that spread across her face betrayed her. I had a date last weekend. The blind date Caroline set up? The one you were convinced would be a disaster? The very same. Rachel's eyes widened. And, don't leave me hanging here. So Lena told her about Romano's, about the conversation that had felt effortless until her panic took over, about walking out and being chased down by 3 determined 8-year-olds who signed fluently and refused to let her give up. She told her about Evan's late wife, about his understanding that came from experience rather than pity, about the way he'd promised to show up even when things got hard. He has triplets, Rachel said when Lena finished. 8-year-old triplets. And you're still interested? I know it sounds crazy. It sounds terrifying, but also kind of perfect for you. Rachel studied her friend carefully. You're really doing this? You're really letting yourself hope again? The question hit harder than it should have. Lena set down her sandwich, suddenly not hungry. I'm trying to. But every time my phone buzzes with a message from him, I have this moment of panic where I'm convinced it's going to be him backing out, making excuses, realizing I'm too much work. Has he given you any reason to think that? No, which almost makes it worse because I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed Lena's hand. Maybe there is no other shoe. Maybe he's exactly who he seems to be. People don't actually exist like that. Says who? Your ex-boyfriends who couldn't handle basic human decency? Rachel's expression turned fierce. Lena, you've dated some truly terrible men. That asshole from the gym who dumped you via text. That guy from the teachers' convention who literally said dating you was inspirational, like you were some kind of charity project. You've been burned so many times that you think fire is all there is. But maybe Evan is different. Maybe he's actually just a good guy who likes you. Lena wanted to believe it. Desperately wanted to believe it. But years of disappointment had taught her that hope was dangerous, that letting her guard down only led to pain. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Evan. The girls want to know if you like mini golf. Apparently we need to take you on a proper family outing to make sure you're suitable. Their words, not mine. I told them this is wildly inappropriate, but they're very insistent. Despite everything, Lena laughed. He wants me to meet his daughters officially. Well, they want to meet me. That's good, right? It's terrifying. What if they decide they don't like me? What if I'm not what they're expecting? Lena, they literally chased you down in a parking lot to convince you to give their dad another chance. I think you're safe. But safety had never been Lena's strong suit when it came to relationships. She'd spent so long protecting herself that she'd forgotten how to be vulnerable, how to let people in without immediately planning her exit strategy. She typed back, "Mini golf sounds fun. When?" Evan's response came quickly. "Saturday afternoon? Fair warning, Grace is insanely competitive and Sophie keeps score like a professional accountant. Emma just likes hitting the ball and watching it go in fun directions. I can handle competitive 8-year-olds. Famous last words. Saturday arrived too quickly and too slowly all at once. Lena changed her outfit 3 times before settling on jeans and a comfortable sweater, casual enough not to look like she was trying too hard, but put together enough to make a good impression. She stared at herself in the mirror, giving herself a pep talk that felt increasingly absurd. They're children, she told her reflection. 8-year-old children who already like you. This is not a big deal. Her reflection didn't look convinced. The mini golf course was one of those family entertainment centers that tried to do everything at once. Arcade games, batting cages, go-karts, and an 18-hole course decorated with windmills and cartoon animals that had seen better days. Lena spotted Evan's truck in the parking lot and felt her heart rate spike. They were waiting near the entrance, a Brooks family unit that was impossible to miss. Evan waved when he saw her, and all 3 girls immediately started bouncing with excitement. "You came!" Grace shouted, running toward Lena with the kind of reckless abandon only 8-year-olds possessed. "Grace, inside voice," Evan called after her, but he was smiling. "This is outside, Dad," Grace pointed out as she skidded to a halt in front of Lena. "So technically, I can be as loud as I want." "She's got you there," Lena said, signing along as she spoke so all the girls could follow. Sophie and Emma approached more sedately, though their eyes were just as bright with curiosity and excitement. "We're glad you're here," Sophie signed formally. "Dad has been nervous all day. He changed his shirt twice." "Sophie," Evan's face flushed, "we don't share that information." "Why not? It's true." "Truth and discretion are both important," he muttered, then turned to Lena with an apologetic smile. "Hi. Welcome to Chaos. Hi yourself." Lena felt some of her nervousness ease at his obvious discomfort. At least she wasn't the only one who was anxious about this. They collected putters and scorecards from the front desk, and the attendant, a bored-looking teenager, explained the rules in a monotone that suggested he'd given this speech 1,000 times. Evan translated the important parts into sign language, a gesture so automatic and natural that Lena felt something warm unfold in her chest. "Okay, teams," Sophie announced once they were at the first hole. "Emma and Grace versus me, Dad, and Lena." "Why do you get Lena?" Emma protested. "Because I called it first. Also, we need to make sure the teams are even, and Dad is terrible at mini-golf." "I am not terrible," Evan argued. "I'm just strategically challenged." "You hit the ball into the pond 3 times last time we came here," Grace pointed out. "That pond has a grudge against me." Watching them bicker and tease each other, Lena felt like she was witnessing something sacred. This was their family dynamic, worn smooth by years of practice, full of inside jokes and comfortable ribbing. And they were letting her see it, inviting her into their private world without hesitation. The first few holes were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Sophie approached each shot with the precision of a professional golfer, analyzing angles and accounting for the slope of the green. Emma hit the ball with cheerful randomness, more interested in the decorative elements than her actual score. Grace played like she was at war with the course itself, attacking each hole with fierce determination. And Evan, true to his daughter's assessment, was spectacularly bad at mini-golf. His first shot ricocheted off a wooden barrier and nearly hit another group. His second somehow ended up behind him. By the 3rd hole, Lena was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. "It's not funny," Evan protested, but he was grinning too. "It's a little funny," Lena managed between giggles. "Traitor, you're supposed to be on my team." "I am on your team. That doesn't mean I can't appreciate the comedy of watching you fight with an inanimate object and lose." Grace high-fived Emma. "I like her, Dad. She's honest." Sophie was keeping meticulous score, her handwriting tiny and precise on the scorecard. After the 5th hole, she showed it to Lena with a solemn expression. "We're losing," she signed, "but it's okay because Dad is having fun and that's what matters." The observation was so mature, so achingly sweet, that Lena had to blink back unexpected tears. "You're a good daughter," she signed back. Sophie's face lit up with pride. They played through the course, and with each hole, Lena felt herself relaxing more into the rhythm of their family. The girls asked her questions about her students, about what it was like to be deaf, about whether she liked cats more than dogs. They were curious without being rude, interested in her as a person rather than as a curiosity. At hole 12, which featured a loop-de-loop that seemed physically impossible to actually use, Emma tugged on Lena's sleeve. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice quiet. "Of course." "Did you know our mom?" The question caught Lena off guard. She glanced at Evan, who was helping Grace retrieve her ball from yet another water hazard, then back at Emma's earnest face. "No, sweetheart, I didn't. But your dad has told me some things about her. She sounds like she was an amazing person." "She was the best," Emma agreed. "She made really good pancakes, and she always knew when we were sad even if we didn't say anything. And she taught us sign language from when we were babies so we could all talk together." "That's a beautiful gift she gave you." Emma was quiet for a moment, working through something in her 8-year-old mind. "Dad says you remind him of her sometimes. Not like you're the same person, but like you have the same kind of strong. Is that weird?" Lena's throat tightened. "No, honey, that's not weird at all. It's actually really sweet." "Good, because we like you and we want Dad to be happy again. He's been sad for a really long time, even though he tries to hide it." Before Lena could respond, Sophie called out that it was their turn. Emma skipped away to retrieve her putter, leaving Lena standing by the loop-de-loop with her heart in her throat. Evan appeared at her elbow. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Emma just told me you've been sad for a long time." He winced. "Kids don't understand the concept of TM1, do they? She also said she likes me and wants you to be happy." "Well, she's not wrong on either count." Evan's hand brushed against hers, a brief touch that felt monumental. "Is this okay? The girls, the questions, all of it? I know it's a lot." "It's overwhelming," Lena admitted. "But in a good way, I think. They're incredible, Evan, all 3 of them. They like you too. Sophie told me this morning that you passed her initial assessment with acceptable marks." "Just acceptable?" "That's high praise from Sophie. She has very exacting standards." They finished the course with Team Emma and Grace winning by a landslide, mostly because Evan's score was so catastrophically bad that it dragged Team Sophie, Dad, and Lena down into mathematical defeat. Grace did a victory dance that involved a lot of jumping and some questionable interpretations of popular dance moves. Sophie graciously congratulated the winners while making notes about what went wrong with their strategy. Emma just looked happy to have played. "Ice cream," Evan suggested as they returned their putters. "I think we've earned it after that humiliation." The ice cream parlor next door was doing brisk business. Families and couples crowded around small tables with dripping cones. They squeezed into a corner booth, the girls piling onto one side while Evan and Lena took the other. "Can I get the triple scoop?" Grace asked hopefully. "You can get a double scoop," Evan countered, "because I know what happens when you get 3 scoops and I'm not dealing with the sugar crash later." "What about 2 doubles?" "Nice try. 1 double scoop, final offer." Grace sighed dramatically but accepted the terms. Sophie ordered strawberry with precise specifications about not mixing flavors. Emma got cookies and cream with extra cookie pieces, and Lena chose mint chocolate chip. Evan got vanilla, which his daughters immediately mocked him for. "Vanilla is boring, Dad," Grace announced. "Vanilla is classic," he defended. "Classic means boring." "You're 8. What do you know about classic?" "I know that vanilla is what you order when you can't make decisions." "I made a decision. I decided on vanilla." The banter continued, easy and affectionate, while they waited for their order. Lena watched Evan with his daughters and saw the kind of father she'd always hoped existed, but rarely encountered. Present, patient, genuinely interested in their thoughts, even when they were teasing him mercilessly. When their ice cream arrived, conversation lulled as everyone focused on eating before the summer heat turned everything into soup. Lena was halfway through her cone when Sophie set down her cup and looked at her with an expression far too serious for someone with strawberry ice cream on her chin. "Can I ask you a personal question?" Sophie signed. "Sure," Lena signed back, bracing herself. "Why did you run away at the restaurant?" The table went quiet. Even Grace stopped mid-lick to watch the exchange. Evan started to intervene. "Sophie, that's not appropriate." But Lena held up a hand. "It's okay." She turned to Sophie, making sure all three girls could see her face as she spoke, and signed simultaneously. I ran away because I was scared. I've been hurt before by people who said they liked me, but then changed their minds when they realized being with me took extra effort. So when your dad was being so nice and everything felt too good to be true, I panicked. I thought it was better to leave before he could leave me. That's sad, Emma said softly. It is sad, but it's also something I'm working on, learning to trust that not everyone is going to hurt me. Dad won't hurt you, Grace stated with absolute certainty. He's too nice. Sometimes he's so nice it's annoying. Grace, Evan warned, but his lips twitched. Sophie wasn't done. But what if you get scared again? What if you want to run away again? It was the same question Lena had been asking herself all week. The same fear that woke her up at 3 a.m, convinced this was all going to fall apart. Then I hope your dad will remind me why I should stay, she said honestly. And I hope you three will too. Because even though we just met, I already know you're pretty special. Sophie considered this, then nodded as if Lena had passed some invisible test. Okay, you can keep dating our dad. Sophie, you can't give people permission to date me, Evan protested. Why not? We're part of the family. We should have a say. That's not how this works. It should be. Lena caught Evan's eye across the table and saw her own mixture of amusement and exasperation reflected back. His daughters were a force of nature, and she was quickly learning that resistance was futile. They finished their ice cream and walked back to the parking lot, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement. The girls were sugar-energized and chattering about what game they wanted to play when they got home. Evan walked close to Lena, their shoulders occasionally bumping in a way that felt deliberate and comfortable. Thank you for today, he said quietly. I know meeting the girls officially was a big step. Thank you for including me. They're wonderful, Evan. Exhausting, but wonderful. That's the most accurate description of them I've ever heard. He paused at her car. So, same time next week? Maybe something with less miniature golf and more actual conversation? I'd like that. The girls had clustered around Evan's truck, still debating the merits of various video games, but all three turned to wave at Lena as she got into her car. Bye, Lena, Emma called. See you next week. Sophie signed. Don't forget about us, Grace added, because apparently everything had to be dramatic when you were 8. Lena waved back, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. She drove home in a daze, replaying the afternoon in her mind, the easy laughter, the genuine acceptance, the way Evan's daughters had simply folded her into their world like she'd always belonged there. Her phone buzzed at a red light. A text from Evan. Sophie says you passed her evaluation with strong potential for long-term compatibility. I'm choosing to take that as a win. Lena smiled at the screen. Tell Sophie I'm honored. What's your evaluation? I think you're perfect, but I'm biased. The light turned green, but Lena sat there for an extra moment, staring at those words. Perfect. When was the last time someone had called her perfect without following it up with qualifications or conditions? A horn honked behind her, jolting her back to reality. She drove the rest of the way home with butterflies in her stomach and a smile she couldn't quite suppress. The following week brought a different kind of challenge. Lena's star student, Marcus, was having a particularly difficult time in class. He was a bright 7-year-old with autism who struggled with transitions and unexpected changes. On Tuesday, their regular classroom aide called in sick, and the substitute who replaced her didn't understand Marcus's routine. By lunchtime, he'd had a complete meltdown, and Lena had spent 40 minutes sitting with him in the quiet corner of the classroom while he rocked and stimmed and gradually came back to himself. She was exhausted by the time she got home, emotionally drained in the way that only people who worked with special needs kids truly understood. Her apartment felt too quiet, too empty, and the silence that usually brought her peace felt oppressive. Without thinking too hard about it, she texted Evan. Rough day. Just need to vent if you have a minute. His response came within seconds. Call me, or FaceTime if you want to sign it out. They'd been doing this all week, video calls that let them communicate in the hybrid way that felt most natural, her signing while he spoke and signed back, a conversation that existed in 2 languages simultaneously. Lena hit the FaceTime button before she could second-guess herself. Evan's face appeared on screen, concern already evident in his expression. Behind him, she could see what looked like his kitchen, dinner preparations abandoned on the counter. "Hey," he said, signing along. "What happened?" And Lena told him. About Marcus, about the substitute aide who'd tried to force him to participate when he clearly needed space, about the way the other students had gotten upset when Marcus was upset, about how she'd had to choose between managing one child's crisis and maintaining order for the other 11. She told him about the frustration of knowing exactly what Marcus needed, but not being able to provide it without support, about the administrative bureaucracy that meant requesting a consistent aide took weeks of paperwork. Evan listened without interrupting, his face on the screen a steady point of focus. When she finally ran out of words, he was quiet for a moment before responding. "You're an amazing teacher," he said simply. "And what you did for Marcus today, giving him that space and patience when everyone else was trying to force him to be something he couldn't be in that moment, that's everything. You know that, right?" "It doesn't feel like everything. It feels like I failed the other 11 kids who needed me too." "You can't be everywhere at once, Lena. You made the call you had to make, and you got all 12 kids through the day safely. That's not failure. That's success under impossible circumstances." Something in Lena's chest loosened. "Thank you. I just needed someone to tell me I wasn't completely screwing everything up." "You're not screwing anything up. You're doing the best you can with limited resources and a system that doesn't support you the way it should." They talked for another 20 minutes, the conversation drifting from her day to his, a project that was running behind schedule, a client who kept changing specifications, the girl's ongoing campaign to convince him to get another dog. It was normal, domestic, the kind of conversation couples had when they were simply sharing their lives with each other. When they finally hung up, Lena felt lighter. Not perfect, not fixed, but seen and supported in a way she hadn't experienced before. This became their pattern over the following weeks. Video calls that stretched late into the night, weekend outings with the girls that felt less like dates and more like family time, quiet moments stolen between the chaos of their respective lives. Evan showed up for her in small, consistent ways, remembering when she had difficult parent-teacher conferences and texting encouragement, learning about her students so he could ask specific questions about their progress, understanding when she needed space versus when she needed company. And Lena, despite every instinct screaming at her to protect herself, found herself falling. Not the dramatic movie montage kind of falling, but the slow, inevitable kind that happened when someone genuinely saw you and chose to stay anyway. But with the falling came the fear, because the higher she climbed, the further she had to fall when it all came crashing down. And Lena, who'd been burned so many times before, couldn't quite believe that this time would be different. The breaking point came 6 weeks into their relationship, on an October evening that started perfectly and ended in disaster. Evan had planned a surprise, dinner at a nicer restaurant followed by an outdoor movie screening in the park. The girls were with Caroline for the night, giving them a rare evening alone. Lena had dressed up, wearing the green dress that made her eyes stand out and the heels she usually reserved for special occasions. Dinner was perfect. The restaurant had good lighting and quiet corners, making conversation easy. Evan was relaxed and funny, telling stories about his early days in construction when he'd been young and stupid and convinced he knew everything. Lena shared memories from college, from the terrifying early months after her accident when she'd had to relearn how to exist in the world. They were halfway through dessert when Evan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted. "Everything okay?" Lena asked. "Yeah, just Caroline's having some issue with the girls. Nothing serious, but I should probably call her back real quick. Do you mind?" "Of course not. Go ahead." Evan stepped outside to make the call, and Lena was left alone at the table. She pulled out her own phone, scrolling through emails and trying not to feel abandoned, even though she knew she was being ridiculous. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Lena's good mood started to curdle into something darker, more familiar. Through the restaurant window, she could see Evan pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing in obvious frustration. The rational part of her brain knew he was dealing with something legitimate. The irrational part, the part shaped by years of being an afterthought, started whispering that this was the beginning of the end, that his kids would always come first, which was right and good, but that meant she would always come second, third, 10th. That being with a single father meant accepting that she would never be the priority. When Evan finally came back inside, his face was tight with stress. "I'm so sorry," he said, signing as he spoke. "Caroline's having car trouble and the girls are freaking out because they're supposed to be at a sleepover in an hour, and now the logistics are all messed up and—" He ran a hand through his hair. "I need to go deal with this. I'm so sorry, Lena. I know we had plans." "It's fine," she heard herself say, even though it wasn't fine. "Go take care of your family." "Come with me," he offered. "You could hang out while I sort this out, and then we could still catch the movie?" But Lena was already pulling back, already protecting herself from the hurt she knew was coming. "No, you should focus on the girls. We can do this another time." "Lena, really, it's fine. These things happen." She could see the frustration and apology warring on his face, could see him trying to find a solution that would fix everything. But there was no solution, because this was just reality. His daughters would always come first, as they should, and she would always be the thing that got pushed aside when something more important came up. They parted in the parking lot with an awkward hug and promises to talk soon. Lena drove home with tears streaming down her face, furious at herself for crying, for caring, for letting herself believe this time could be different. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, texts from Evan apologizing, explaining, trying to make plans for tomorrow. She ignored them all, turned off her phone, and spent the evening in her apartment alternating between crying and berating herself for being so stupid. The next morning brought clarity and resolve. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of, getting attached, building hope, only to be reminded that she would never be anyone's first choice. Evan had his daughters, his responsibilities, his whole established life. There was no room in that life for someone as complicated as her. She typed out a message. "I think we should take a break. This is moving too fast and I need some space to think." His response came immediately. "Can we talk about this, please?" But Lena had already made up her mind. She didn't respond, just set her phone down and tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice. Except the relief she expected never came. Instead, there was just emptiness and the growing certainty that she'd just run away from the best thing that had happened to her in years. 3 days passed in radio silence. Evan respected her request for space, though she could see him viewing her social media posts, could feel his presence in the lack of it. The girls had sent her a few texts, Sophie asking if she was mad at them, Emma wondering if she'd done something wrong, Grace demanding to know when they were going mini-golfing again. Lena couldn't bring herself to respond. How did you explain to 8-year-olds that you were sabotaging your own happiness out of fear? On Thursday evening, there was a knock at her door. Lena peered through the peephole and saw Evan standing in the hallway, holding something she couldn't quite make out. She considered not answering, considered pretending she wasn't home. But her car was in the parking lot and her lights were on, and Evan was nothing if not persistent. She opened the door. "Hi," he said, and his voice was tired but gentle. "I know you asked for space, and I've tried to respect that, but I think we need to talk about what's really going on here." "Evan, please, just 5 minutes." Lena stepped aside and let him in, her heart hammering against her ribs. Evan entered her apartment, and she noticed he was carrying a notebook, one of those composition books with the black and white marbled covers. "What's that?" she asked. "This," Evan said, holding it up, "is what Michelle called her panic journal. When she got overwhelmed or scared about the future or convinced I was going to leave her because being with someone who was deaf was too hard, she'd write it all down here. Every fear, every worst-case scenario, every reason why she wasn't good enough." He opened the notebook to a random page and showed it to Lena. The handwriting was feminine and precise, the words devastating. "He's going to realize I'm too much work. No one stays. They never stay." Lena's breath caught. "She struggled with this too," Evan continued softly. "This fear that she wasn't worth the effort, that being deaf made her less deserving of love. And no matter how many times I told her she was wrong, part of her never quite believed it." He looked at Lena directly. "I don't want to make the same mistakes with you that I made with Michelle. I don't want to let you convince yourself you're not worth fighting for when you absolutely are." "This isn't about worth," Lena managed. "This is about reality. Your daughters will always come first, and they should. But that means I'll always be secondary, and I've been secondary my whole life. I can't do it anymore." You're right that my daughters come first, Evan agreed. But that doesn't mean you're secondary. That's not how love works, Lena. Love isn't a competition or a hierarchy. There's room in my life for all of you. Until there isn't. Until something has to give and I'm what gets sacrificed. That's not... Evan took a breath, clearly trying to stay calm. Saturday night was an emergency. My sister's car broke down on the highway with my 3 kids in it. Yes, I had to leave our date. But I asked you to come with me because I wanted you there. You're the one who decided you didn't belong. The words hit like a slap. That's not fair. Isn't it? You asked for space not because I did something wrong, but because you're looking for an excuse to run. Just like at the restaurant on our first date. Just like you probably have in every relationship before this one. You don't know that. Don't I? Evan's voice was gentle but firm. Lena, I understand that you've been hurt. I understand that trusting someone new is terrifying. But at some point, you have to decide whether you're going to keep letting your past dictate your future or whether you're going to take a risk on something real. Lena felt tears threatening and hated herself for it. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken to do this? You're not broken. Evan stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. You're scared. There's a difference. And I'm scared too, if we're being honest. I'm terrified of screwing this up, of not being enough, of my daughters getting attached to you and then losing someone else they love. But I'm willing to be scared if it means having you in my life. The notebook was still in his hand, Michelle's fears preserved in permanent ink. Lena thought about this woman she'd never met, this woman who'd fought the same battles she was fighting now. Had she ever won? Had she ever found peace? What happened? Lena asked quietly. With Michelle and her fears, did she ever stop being scared? Evan's smile was sad. Not entirely, but she learned to trust me anyway. She learned that being scared didn't mean she had to run. He paused. The last thing she said to me the night before she died was, "Promise me you'll let yourself love again." I told her it was too soon to talk about that, but she insisted. She said, "Promise me you won't let fear keep you alone." He held out the notebook to Lena. "I'm keeping that promise. I'm not letting fear keep me alone. The question is, are you?" Lena took the notebook with shaking hands, flipping through pages of Michelle's handwriting, fears and doubts interspersed with moments of joy, with reminders to herself about Evan's love, with lists of reasons to stay even when leaving felt safer. On the last page with writing, dated just weeks before Michelle's death, there was a single line. He stayed. Even knowing the end was coming, he stayed. That's how I know it was real. Lena closed the notebook carefully, tears streaming freely now. "I'm sorry I ran. I'm sorry I didn't believe you when you said you weren't going anywhere. I'm sorry I didn't realize how much that phone call would trigger you." Evan wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "We're both going to make mistakes, Lena. We're both going to hurt each other sometimes without meaning to. But if we're going to do this, really do this, we have to promise to talk about it instead of running. I'm really bad at not running. Then I'll chase you, every single time, until you believe you're worth chasing." And standing in her apartment, holding a dead woman's journal full of fears that could have been her own, Lena made a choice. Not to stop being scared, that felt impossible, but to be scared and stay anyway. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try. I can't promise I won't panic again, but I'll try." Evan pulled her into his arms, and Lena let herself lean into him, let herself accept the comfort she'd been denying herself for days. They stood like that for a long time, two people who'd both loved and lost, learning how to love again, despite the fear. "The girls have been asking about you non-stop," Evan murmured into her hair. "Sophie's convinced you hate her because of what happened Saturday. Emma made you a card, and Grace has informed me that if you don't come to her school play next week, she's running away to live with you." Lena laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "I should probably text them back then. They'd like that." She pulled back just enough to look at his face. "I really am sorry, Evan, for shutting you out, for assuming the worst. And I'm sorry for not understanding how scared you were. We're learning, okay? Both of us." That's allowed. They spent the rest of the evening on Lena's couch, talking through everything that had happened, making promises about communication and honesty and fighting through the hard moments instead of around them. When Evan finally left,
Well past midnight, Lena felt wrung out but somehow lighter. She opened Michelle's journal one more time, reading through the fears that mirrored her own. But this time she also noticed something else. The progression from terror to trust. The way Michelle's entries shifted from "he's going to leave" to "he's still here" to finally "he's always been here." Maybe, Lena thought as she got ready for bed, maybe that progression was possible for her too. Maybe she could learn to trust that someone staying wasn't a fluke or a mistake, but a choice they made every single day. It wouldn't be easy. Her history of hurt ran deep, and years of self-protection wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lena thought maybe it was worth trying. She fell asleep that night with her phone on her nightstand, messages from 3 little girls lighting up the screen with reminders that she wasn't just dating Evan. She was being invited into an entire family that had somehow decided she belonged. And maybe, just maybe, they were right. The following morning, Lena woke to 17 text messages. 3 from Emma with photos of a card she'd made, construction paper covered in glitter and stickers spelling out "We miss you, Lena" in wobbly letters. 5 from Sophie with detailed updates about what she'd missed in the past 3 days, including a complete breakdown of their science project on plant growth. 9 from Grace, most of which were just emojis and random observations about life, including one that simply read, "Why do hot dogs come in packages of 10 but buns come in packages of 8? This is a conspiracy." Lena found herself smiling at her phone screen, the tightness in her chest from the past few days finally beginning to ease. She responded to each girl individually, thanking Emma for the card, congratulating Sophie on her science project findings, and agreeing with Grace that the hot dog to bun ratio was indeed suspicious and possibly worthy of further investigation. The last message was from Evan, sent at 6 in the morning. "The girls are excited you texted back. Fair warning, they're planning an ambush for this weekend. Something about making sure you know you're part of the family now. I've learned not to ask too many questions when they get that look in their eyes." "Should I be worried?" Lena typed back. "Probably, but in a good way." Friday afternoon brought Grace's school play, a somewhat chaotic production of The 3 Little Pigs, where Grace played the wolf with an enthusiasm that bordered on terrifying. Lena arrived at the elementary school auditorium 20 minutes early, scanning the crowd for Evan and his daughters. She found them in the 3rd row, Sophie and Emma saving seats with the fierce determination of children on a mission. Emma spotted her first and started waving frantically, nearly hitting the woman in front of her. "Lena, we saved you a seat, right here in the middle." Lena made her way down the row, excusing herself past other parents and grandparents. The seat they'd saved put her directly between Evan and Sophie, a positioning that felt both intentional and impossibly sweet. "Hi," Evan said as she settled in, his hand briefly touching hers on the armrest. "Thanks for coming. I wouldn't miss it. Grace threatened to run away and live with me if I didn't show up." She absolutely meant that threat. She's already packed a bag twice this week. Sophie leaned across Lena to get her father's attention. "Dad, did you tell Lena about the thing?" "What thing?" Evan's eyes widened slightly. "Sophie, we talked about this. The thing where we're all going camping next weekend and Lena should come because she's basically part of the family now and families do stuff together." The announcement hung in the air. Lena felt Evan tense beside her, clearly mortified that his 8-year-old daughter had just casually invited her on a family camping trip without consulting him first. "Sophie," he said carefully, "we usually discuss these things before extending invitations. But you were going to invite her anyway, right?" Sophie's expression was maddeningly logical. "You told Aunt Caroline that you wanted Lena to come camping with us. I heard you on the phone yesterday." Evan's face flushed. "Eavesdropping is not polite, Sophie Marie. The kitchen door was open. That's not eavesdropping, that's existing in the same house." Sophie turned to Lena with complete seriousness. "Will you come? We're going to Pine Lake, and there's hiking and fishing, and we get to sleep in tents. Dad always lets us stay up late and make s'mores until we feel sick." "That's not something to advertise," Evan muttered. "Please?" Emma added her voice to the campaign, looking at Lena with those big, hopeful eyes that were impossible to resist. "It'll be so much fun, and you can share our tent, and Sophie brought extra sleeping bags just in case." Lena looked at Evan, trying to read his expression. He seemed caught between embarrassment and hope, clearly wanting her to say yes but not wanting to pressure her. "You don't have to decide now," he said quietly. "The girls are just excited, and sometimes they forget about things like personal boundaries and giving people time to think." But Lena found she didn't need time to think. A week ago, the invitation would have sent her spiraling into panic about moving too fast, about getting too entangled, about setting herself up for inevitable heartbreak. Now, after reading Michelle's journal and confronting her own fears, the invitation felt less like a trap and more like exactly what Sophie had called it, a family doing stuff together. "I'd love to come," she said, and watched three faces light up with identical expressions of joy. "Really?" Emma bounced in her seat. "You're really coming?" "Really. I haven't been camping since I was a kid, so you'll have to teach me everything." "We're excellent teachers," Sophie informed her solemnly. "Last year, we taught Dad how to properly build a fire after he nearly burned down our campsite." "That was one time," Evan protested, "and the ranger said it was only a small incident, not nearly burning anything down." "He used the fire extinguisher, Dad. That counts as burning something down." Before Evan could defend himself further, the lights dimmed and the play began. It was exactly the kind of elementary school production Lena remembered from her own childhood. Enthusiastic, if not entirely coordinated, with sets that wobbled, and kids who forgot their lines but powered through anyway. Grace made her entrance as the big bad wolf with such aggressive growling that several younger children in the audience looked genuinely frightened. "She's really committed to the role," Lena whispered to Evan. "That's Grace. Everything at 110% or not at all." Watching Grace huff and puff across the stage, Lena felt something shift in her chest. This was what she'd been fighting against, this sense of belonging, of being part of something bigger than herself. She'd spent so long protecting her heart that she'd forgotten what it felt like to actually use it, to let people in and accept the risk that came with caring. When Grace took her final bow, all three girls on their row stood and cheered like they were at a rock concert. Evan joined them, whistling through his fingers in a way that made several parents turn around. Lena stood too, clapping until her hands hurt, caught up in the pure joy of celebrating someone else's moment. After the play, they waited in the lobby for Grace to emerge from backstage. She burst through the doors, still wearing her wolf ears and tail, her face flushed with triumph. "Did you see me?" she demanded, running straight to Lena. "Did you see when I almost knocked over the pig house? That wasn't supposed to happen, but I made it look like it was on purpose." "You were amazing," Lena said, and meant it. "Absolutely terrifying. I was genuinely concerned for those pigs." Grace beamed. "Really?" "Really. Best wolf I've ever seen." "Told you she was good," Sophie said to her father. "I said Lena would appreciate Grace's artistic interpretation." They took Grace out for pizza to celebrate, crowding into a booth at the local Italian place that was perpetually crowded and slightly too loud. Lena found herself wedged between Emma and the wall, with Grace climbing over everyone to steal bites from different plates and Sophie organizing the leftover breadsticks into some kind of architectural structure. It was chaos. It was loud. It was exactly the kind of overwhelming family dinner that would have sent her running for the exit 6 months ago. And it was perfect. "So, about this camping trip," Evan said during a rare moment of relative quiet. "Fair warning, we're not fancy campers. We're talking tents and sleeping bags on the ground, not cabins or RVs." "I figured as much," Lena said. "What should I bring?" This launched Sophie into a detailed list of necessary camping supplies, including several items Lena was fairly certain were not actually necessary, like a compass and a first aid kit specifically for snake bites. "We're going to Pine Lake, not the Amazon rainforest," Evan interjected. "We've never seen a snake there in 5 years of camping." "But we might this year," Sophie insisted. "It's important to be prepared." "You just want an excuse to use the snakebite kit you got for your birthday." "Can you blame me? It has a venom extractor and everything." The bickering continued, comfortable and familiar, and Lena realized this was what normal looked like in the Brooks family. Constant, gentle chaos, everyone talking over each other, but all of it underscored with genuine affection and interest in each other's lives. "What about clothes?" Emma asked, pulling Lena's attention back to the camping discussion. "You need layers because it gets cold at night, and good shoes for hiking, and a hat for sun protection. And bug spray," Grace added. "Lots of bug spray. The mosquitoes at Pine Lake are the size of birds." "They're really not," Evan said tiredly. They're pretty big, Dad, Sophie agreed with her sister for once. Remember when Emma got bitten 17 times in one night? I counted them, Emma confirmed sadly. It was a terrible experience. Lena made mental notes, already planning a shopping trip for camping supplies. She'd been outdoorsy once in the years before her accident, but it had been over 2 decades since she'd slept in a tent. The thought was both exciting and mildly terrifying. They finished dinner and walked out to the parking lot, the girls sugar high from too much soda and still buzzing with energy from the play. Evan corralled them toward his truck while Lena headed for her car. "Hey," Evan called after her. She turned. "Thank you for coming tonight. It meant a lot to Grace, to all of us." "I enjoyed it. Your daughters are a very enthusiastic cheering section." "That's one word for it." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "Can I call you later, after I get these 3 into bed?" "I'd like that."
The call came at 9:30, after what Evan described as an epic bedtime battle, involving 3 separate requests for water, 4 trips to the bathroom, and a lengthy negotiation about whether stuffed animals needed their own blankets. "They're finally asleep," he said, and Lena could hear the exhaustion and affection in his voice. "Or at least they're in their rooms with the lights off, which is close enough. Sounds like quite an ordeal. Every single night. You'd think I'd have it down to a science by now, but they're always one step ahead of me." She heard what sounded like him settling onto a couch. "So, camping. Are you sure you want to do this? I know the girls ambushed you pretty hard, and you can absolutely say no if it's too much too fast." "Evan, I said yes because I want to come. Not because your daughters are persuasive, though they definitely are." "Okay? Good." A pause. "I just don't want you to feel pressured into family stuff before you're ready. We can take this slower if you need to." Lena thought about the past few months, about how she'd spent so much energy trying to slow things down and protect herself that she'd nearly destroyed the best thing to happen to her in years. "I don't want slower," she said. "I want real. And real means sometimes things move at their own pace instead of the pace we think they should move at." She could hear the smile in Evan's voice when he responded. "When did you get so wise?" "I read it in someone's journal. This woman who was scared of the same things I'm scared of, but who decided to trust anyway." "Michelle would have liked you," Evan said softly. "She would have appreciated how hard you're fighting your fears. She'd probably also have some choice words about me not communicating better, but mostly she'd like you." "I wish I could have known her." "She'd probably be amused by this whole situation." "She always said I needed someone who wouldn't let me get away with my tendency to avoid difficult conversations. You definitely don't let me avoid anything." "Is that a compliment?" "The highest kind." They talked for another hour, about everything and nothing. Lena told him about Marcus finally having a good day at school, about the progress report she had to write that weekend. Evan shared stories about his current construction project, about the client who kept changing their mind about basic design elements. It was the kind of conversation couples had when they were simply enjoying each other's company, no pressure or performance required. When they finally hung up, Lena realized she was smiling. Not the careful, guarded smile she used to protect herself, but a genuine expression of happiness that felt almost foreign after so many years of keeping her emotions locked down. The next week passed in a blur of preparation for the camping trip. Lena bought hiking boots that needed to be broken in, a sleeping bag rated for cold weather, and approximately 17 different types of bug spray after Emma's dire warnings about mosquitoes. She borrowed a backpack from Rachel, who was simultaneously excited and concerned about this development in Lena's love life. "You're going camping," Rachel said for the 3rd time, watching Lena sort through camping supplies spread across her living room floor. "You, who haven't slept outside since you were 12, with a man you've been dating for less than 3 months and his 3 children. When you say it like that, it sounds insane." "Because it is a little insane, but also kind of wonderful." Rachel picked up the snakebite kit Sophie had insisted Lena purchase. "Although this seems excessive. Sophie is very thorough in her planning. She's 8. An 8-year-old with the organizational skills of a military general." Rachel set down the kit and looked at her friend seriously. "You're really doing this. You're really letting yourself fall for this family." It wasn't a question, but Lena answered anyway. "I think I already have. Fallen, I mean. I'm just finally admitting it to myself." "And you're not terrified?" "Oh, I'm absolutely terrified. but I'm also happy in a way I haven't been in years, so I guess I'm choosing to be terrified and happy at the same time. That's very mature of you. Don't sound so surprised. Friday afternoon, Evan picked her up in his truck with the girls already loaded in the back seat, surrounded by camping gear. The entire vehicle smelled like bug spray and anticipation. "Ready for adventure?" he asked as Lena climbed into the passenger seat. "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive to Pine Lake took 2 hours, winding through increasingly dense forest on roads that got progressively narrower. The girls entertained themselves with road trip games, I Spy, the license plate game, and something Sophie had invented called alphabet categories that seemed to have rules only she understood. "Q is for quokka," Emma announced. "That's Australia animals. We're on North American animals," Sophie corrected. "But quokkas are animals, not North American animals." "This game is stupid," Grace declared. "Can we play something else?" "We're playing alphabet categories until we finish the alphabet," Sophie insisted. "Those are the rules." "You made up the rules!" "Which means I get to enforce them." Evan caught Lena's eye and mouthed, "Welcome to my life." She had to bite back a laugh. They reached the campground as the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the lake's surface. The site Evan had reserved was situated among towering pine trees, with a clear view of the water and a fire ring already set up. "Okay, team," Evan said as they piled out of the truck. "You know the drill. Unload gear, set up tents, gather firewood, let's move." The girls sprang into action with the efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. Even Grace, the youngest and most chaotic, knew exactly where things went and what needed to be done first. Lena tried to help, but mostly just followed instructions from Sophie, who had apparently appointed herself campsite manager. "The tent goes here, not there," Sophie directed, pointing to a flat area near the fire ring. "And make sure you stake all the corners, or it'll blow away in the night." "Has that happened before?" "Once. It was very dramatic." Emma cried. "I was 5," Emma called from where she was unloading sleeping bags. "And it was scary." Setting up camp took the better part of an hour. By the time the tents were erected and their supplies organized, darkness had fully settled and the temperature had dropped noticeably. Evan built a fire while the girls changed into warmer clothes, and soon they were all gathered around the flames with hot dogs on sticks and a cooler full of supplies. "This is the best part," Emma said, her hot dog already charred beyond recognition. "Sitting by the fire and telling stories." "What kind of stories?" Lena asked. "Scary ones, usually. Dad tells the best scary stories." "I don't know if Lena wants to hear scary stories her first night camping with us," Evan said. "I can handle scary stories," Lena assured him. "Hit me with your best shot." What followed was an enthusiastic and only moderately coherent tale about a creature that lived in Pine Lake and came out at night to steal the shoes of unsuspecting campers. Grace added sound effects. Emma insisted on providing color commentary about which parts were real and which were obviously made up, Dad. Sophie fact-checked the entire narrative, pointing out several geographical impossibilities. By the time the story ended, Lena's sides hurt from laughing, and her hot dog was completely forgotten on her stick. "See, this is why Mom always said Dad should have been a writer instead of a builder," Sophie said. "He makes stuff up really well." "Your mom said I should do whatever made me happy," Evan corrected gently. "Building makes me happy." "And making up stories about shoe-stealing lake monsters? That's just a bonus." They roasted marshmallows for s'mores, and Lena discovered that Grace's earlier comment about eating until they felt sick was not an exaggeration. By their third round of s'mores, all 3 girls were dragging, sugar-crashed, and heavy-eyed. "All right, monsters," Evan said. "Teeth brushed, pajamas on, bed." The protests were half-hearted at best. Within 20 minutes, all 3 girls were zipped into their sleeping bags in their tent, and Lena could hear their voices getting progressively quieter as sleep pulled them under. She and Evan sat by the fire, the silence between them comfortable and warm. Above them, the stars were incredible. Thousands upon thousands of pinpricks of light in a sky unpolluted by city glow. "This is beautiful," Lena said softly, signing the words even though it was dark enough that the gestures were barely visible. "It is." But Evan was looking at her, not the sky. She felt her face heat and was grateful for the darkness. "Thank you for inviting me."
Well, for letting your daughters ambush me into an invitation. They really like you, all three of them. Sophie told me yesterday that you're the first person since Michelle that she could imagine being part of our family long term. That's a lot of pressure. Is it too much? Lena considered the question honestly. A few months ago, yes, it would have been overwhelming. The weight of expectation from three children who'd already lost one important woman in their lives would have sent her running. But now, sitting by this fire, with the sound of the girl's soft breathing coming from the tent, and Evan's steady presence beside her, it felt less like pressure and more like possibility. No, she said finally, it's not too much. It's scary, but not too much. Good scary or bad scary? Good scary. The kind that means something matters. Evan reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together in the firelight. You matter, Lena. To me, to the girls. I know it's fast and I know it's complicated, but you matter to us. The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and impossibly comforting. She squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers and listening to the sounds of the forest at night. When the cold finally drove them to their respective tents, Evan kissed her forehead softly. Good night, he signed. Good night, she signed back. Lena's tent was smaller than the girls', but cozy once she was zipped into her sleeping bag. She could hear rustling from the other tent, the sound of Evan getting settled. Beyond that, the lake lapping at the shore and the occasional call of a night bird. She'd done it. She'd made it through a full day of family camping without panicking or running or convincing herself she didn't belong. And more than that, she'd enjoyed it, had felt, for the first time in years, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Sleep came easily, and Lena's last thought before drifting off was that maybe Michelle had been right. Maybe staying, even when it was scary, was how you knew it was real. Morning came too early, announced by Emma unzipping Lena's tent and sticking her head inside. Lena, you have to come see the sunrise. It's so pretty, and Dad's making pancakes and Grace fell in the lake. Wait, what? Lena sat up too fast, her head spinning. Grace fell in the lake? Just a little bit. She's fine. But her shoes are wet, so Dad says she has to wear her backup shoes, which she hates because they're last year's shoes. And apparently that matters. Lena unzipped her sleeping bag and crawled out of the tent into the crisp morning air. Sure enough, Grace was sitting by a newly rebuilt fire, wearing mismatched shoes and looking mutinous. Sophie was documenting the entire incident in what appeared to be a camping journal, and Evan was attempting to make pancakes on a camp stove while simultaneously mediating the shoe crisis. How did she fall in the lake? Lena asked, accepting a cup of coffee from Sophie, who was apparently on beverage duty. She was trying to catch a fish with her bare hands, Sophie explained with the weary tone of someone who'd seen this before. Dad said not to, but Grace doesn't really do not to. I almost had it, Grace protested. It was this big. She held her hands approximately 3 feet apart. It was not 3 feet long, Emma said. It was maybe this big. She held her hands about 6 inches apart. You weren't even there. I saw it from the tent. Girls, Evan said without looking up from his pancake making, can we maybe table the fish size debate until after breakfast? Lena grabbed a camp chair and settled in to watch the chaos unfold. This, she realized, was what mornings looked like in the Brooks family. Minor disasters handled with humor, arguments settled through democratic debate, and Evan somehow keeping all the plates spinning while also making pancakes that were only slightly burnt. See, this is the authentic camping experience, Evan said, sliding a pancake onto Lena's plate. It's not really camping unless someone falls in the lake and someone else argues about something completely inconsequential. What's inconsequential mean? Grace asked. It means unimportant, Sophie supplied. The size of the fish is very important. Not compared to your wet shoes, Evan pointed out, which we're going to have to deal with because you can't hike in backup shoes that don't fit. This sparked an entirely new debate about whether hiking was even necessary. Couldn't they just stay at camp and swim? And why did they have to do educational activities on vacation anyway? Lena ate her pancakes and watched 3 8-year-olds out-argue their father with the skill of seasoned lawyers. You're enjoying this, Evan accused, catching her smile. I am, she admitted. This is very entertaining.
Just wait until we actually start hiking. That's when things get really fun. The hike was scheduled for mid-morning, after the girls had burned off some of their breakfast sugar and the temperature had warmed up enough to be comfortable. They packed water bottles and snacks, applied approximately 17 layers of sunscreen per Sophie's insistence, and set off on a trail that wound through the forest. The girls ranged ahead like puppies, stopping to examine every interesting rock or unusual plant. Emma had brought a nature identification book and was determined to catalog every species they encountered. Grace was collecting pine cones for reasons she couldn't quite articulate. Sophie had her camping journal and was taking notes on their progress. Evan and Lena walked together, close enough that their hands occasionally brushed, but not quite touching. The trail was beautiful, dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy and the air smelling like pine and earth. "I have a confession," Evan said after they'd been walking for about 20 minutes. "What's that?" "I was terrified about this weekend, about bringing you camping with us. This is our thing, the girls and me. We've been doing this trip every year since Michelle died, and it's always been just us, our way of remembering her and moving forward at the same time." Lena's chest tightened. "You should have told me. I wouldn't have come if I'd known." "No, that's not what I mean." Evan stopped walking, turning to face her. "I'm glad you're here. The girls insisted you come because they want you to be part of this, part of us. And I realize they're right. Michelle would want this, would want us to keep living, keep letting people in. But it's okay to be scared about it." "Yeah, it is. Well," he smiled softly. "But having you here feels right in a way I didn't expect. Like you're not replacing anything, you're just adding to it." Before Lena could respond, Grace's voice rang out from up ahead. "Dad! Lena! Come quick! Sophie found something weird!" They hurried forward to find all three girls clustered around something on the trail. As they got closer, Lena could see it was a turtle, quite large and attempting to cross the path. "Can we keep it?" Emma asked immediately. "No," Evan said. "Can we at least help it across the trail?" "That we can do." They spent 10 minutes assisting the turtle's journey, with Sophie providing facts about turtle species and Grace insisting the turtle needed a name, even though they were immediately releasing it. The turtle, whom Grace decided to call General Sherman for reasons no one questioned, made it safely to the other side of the trail and disappeared into the underbrush. "Do you think General Sherman has a family?" Emma asked as they continued hiking. "Probably," Evan said. "Most animals do. I hope his family is as nice as our family." The simple statement, delivered with such genuine affection, made Lena's eyes sting. She blinked rapidly, trying to get herself under control before anyone noticed. But Sophie was watching her with those sharp, observant eyes. "Are you crying?" she asked bluntly. "Little bit," Lena admitted, "but it's happy crying." "Because Emma said our family is nice?" "Because she said our family and included me in it." Sophie considered this, then nodded like it made perfect sense. "Well, yeah, you are part of our family. We decided that weeks ago." "You decided?" "At a family meeting. It was unanimous. Even Grace voted yes, and she votes no on everything." "Hey," Grace protested, "that's not true. You voted no on getting a new couch, no on changing the dinner schedule, and no on Dad's idea to reorganize the playroom. Those were all bad ideas. The couch was falling apart." The girls started bickering again, and Evan caught Lena's eye with an expression that clearly said, "See what you've signed up for?" But Lena was smiling through her tears, overwhelmed by the casual acceptance of these three children who'd decided she belonged in their family and had never questioned that decision for a moment. They completed the hike and returned to camp for a lunch of sandwiches and chips. The afternoon was spent swimming in the lake, with Grace determined to redeem herself after the morning's fishing incident. Lena, who hadn't been swimming in years, found herself dragged into the water by all three girls, who insisted she had to participate in their elaborate water games. "The rules are simple," Sophie explained as they treaded water. "We're mermaids, and Dad is the sea monster trying to catch us. We have to swim to the dock without getting tagged." "Shouldn't the sea monster have a less obvious approach?" Lena pointed out, watching Evan wade into the water with all the stealth of a freight train. "Dad's not very good at being sneaky," Emma giggled. The game devolved into chaos quickly, with Evan somehow managing to miss catching any of them despite his size advantage and the girls' tendency to swim directly toward him while shrieking. Lena found herself laughing so hard she forgot to be self-conscious about her hearing aids getting wet or about how she looked in a swimsuit. When they finally emerged from the lake, waterlogged and exhausted, the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon. They dried off and changed into warm clothes, and Evan started preparing dinner while the girls built an elaborate fort out of camping chairs and blankets. "Can Lena sleep in our tent tonight?" Grace asked during dinner, her mouth full of hot dog. "Swallow before you talk," Evan reminded her automatically. "But can she? Please? We want to tell her about Mom, and we do that better at night." The request caught both Evan and Lena off guard. Evan looked at Lena questioningly. "If it's okay with you," she said softly. "Are you sure? They're going to talk your ear off." "I'm sure." That night, after the fire had burned down and the stars had come out, Lena found herself zipped into the girls' tent, surrounded by 3 sleeping bags and an impressive collection of stuffed animals that had apparently been deemed essential camping equipment. "Okay," Sophie said once they were all settled. "We wanted to tell you about Mom because you should know about her if you're going to be part of our family." "You don't have to if you're not comfortable," Lena started, but Emma shook her head. "We want to. It's important." And so, in the darkness of the tent, with only a small flashlight for illumination, 3 8-year-old girls told Lena about their mother, about how she'd made every birthday cake from scratch, even when she was sick, about her terrible singing voice that she'd never been self-conscious about because she couldn't hear it anyway, about the way she'd taught them sign language through games and stories, making it fun instead of a chore. They told her about the hard parts, too, about the cancer, about watching her get sicker, about the final weeks in the hospital when they'd known she wasn't coming home. "Dad cried a lot," Grace said matter-of-factly. "We all did. It was really sad. But Mom told us before she died that it was okay to be happy again," Emma added. "She said being sad forever wasn't honoring her memory, it was just being stuck." Sophie, always the most serious, looked at Lena directly. "She also said Dad would find someone else someday, someone who would love us and love him, and that when that happened, we shouldn't feel like it was replacing her. She said love doesn't work like that." Lena's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. "Your mom sounds like she was incredibly wise." "She was," all 3 girls said in unison. "We think she'd like you," Emma continued, "because you make Dad smile the way he used to smile before she got sick, and you're nice to us without being fake nice." "What's fake nice?" "It's when grown-ups are nice because they think they have to be, not because they want to be," Sophie explained. "Some of Dad's dates were fake nice. They'd ask us questions, but they didn't really care about the answers." "You actually care," Grace added. "When you ask us stuff, you listen to what we say." The simple observation was delivered without fanfare, but it hit Lena like a physical blow. These children, who'd already endured so much loss, were choosing to trust her with their hearts. And they were doing it with an openness and generosity that shamed every defense mechanism she'd ever constructed. "I do care," she said, her voice rough with emotion, "about all of you. So much it scares me sometimes." "Dad says being scared means you care about something enough that losing it would hurt," Sophie said. "So being scared is actually kind of good. Your dad is a smart man. Sometimes," Grace allowed, "other times he's kind of clueless, like when he tried to do Emma's hair for picture day and it looked like a bird's nest." This sparked a round of stories about their father's various parenting mishaps, delivered with the kind of affectionate mockery only children can manage. Lena listened and laughed and felt something inside her shift permanently. She was part of this now. Part of their stories, their memories, their family. When the girls finally started to drift off to sleep, Emma reached out and took Lena's hand. "I'm glad you didn't stay gone when you got scared," she murmured, already half asleep. "I'm glad you came back." "Me too, sweetheart," Lena whispered. "Me too." She lay awake long after the girls had fallen asleep, listening to their soft breathing and the sounds of the night outside. Through the tent fabric, she could see the glow of the fire and a silhouette that was probably Evan, keeping watch over his small kingdom. Lena had spent so many years convinced she didn't deserve this kind of love, this kind of family, had built such high walls around her heart that she'd nearly missed the best thing that had ever tried to happen to her. But 3 8-year-old girls had chased her down in a parking lot and refused to let her give up.
Their father had shown her a journal full of fears that mirrored her own and proven that staying was possible even when it was terrifying. And now here she was, in a tent in the woods, listening to 3 children breathe and sleep and feeling more at home than she'd felt in her entire adult life. Tomorrow, they'd pack up camp and drive back to reality. There would be work stress and parenting challenges and 1,000 small obstacles to navigate. Lena would probably panic again at some point, would feel the old fears rising up to convince her she didn't belong. But tonight, surrounded by sleeping children who'd claimed her as family, Lena let herself believe. Believe that she was worthy of love. Believe that staying was braver than running. Believe that sometimes the family you built was just as real as the one you were born into. Outside, she heard Evan moving around, banking the fire for the night. Soon he'd retreat to his own tent, and they'd all sleep under the stars. This makeshift family held together by choice and courage and the stubborn refusal to let fear win. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lena fell asleep without worrying about when it would all fall apart. Because these people, Evan and Sophie and Emma and Grace, had proven over and over that they weren't going anywhere. And neither, Lena realized as sleep finally claimed her, was she. The weeks following the camping trip settled into a rhythm that felt both natural and extraordinary. Lena found herself woven into the fabric of the Brooks family in ways that would have terrified her just months earlier. Tuesday nights became pizza and homework nights at Evan's house, where she'd help Emma with reading comprehension while Sophie explained advanced math concepts that sometimes went over Lena's head, and Grace created elaborate art projects that invariably involved far too much glitter. Thursday afternoons meant picking up the girls from school when Evan's construction schedule ran late, navigating carpool lines and after-school snack negotiations with the confident ease of someone who'd earned her place in their routine. It wasn't always smooth. There were moments when Lena still felt like an outsider looking in, when the girls would reference inside jokes from before her time, or when Evan would mention something about Michelle that reminded everyone, including Lena, that she was building something new in the space left by someone irreplaceable. But those moments became fewer and farther between, replaced by new inside jokes and shared memories that belonged to all of them. October faded into November, and with it came the reality that Lena couldn't ignore much longer. The question that had been hovering unspoken between her and Evan since that camping trip, growing more urgent with each passing week. Where exactly was this relationship going? They'd never officially defined what they were to each other, had simply fallen into a pattern of togetherness that felt committed without the formal declarations. But Lena's lease was up for renewal in January, and Rachel had started making pointed comments about whether Lena should be looking for a new apartment or maybe considering other living arrangements. "You practically live at his house anyway," Rachel pointed out over lunch one Saturday. "You have a toothbrush there. The girls have a drawer of your art supplies for when you help them with projects. Evan keeps that specific tea you like, even though no one else in the house drinks it. That doesn't mean..." "Lena, you're a family. The only person who doesn't seem to know that is you." The conversation was still rattling around in Lena's head the following Tuesday when she arrived at Evan's house for their usual dinner routine. She let herself in with the key he'd given her 3 weeks ago, another milestone neither of them had made a big deal about, and found controlled chaos in the kitchen. "I'm telling you, the recipe says 1 cup. Sophie was insisting, holding up a measuring cup like evidence in a trial. "But that seems like too much," Evan argued, peering at his tablet screen with flour dusting his forearms. "Are we sure this recipe is right?" "What's going on?" Lena asked, setting down her bag. "Dad's trying to make Mom's birthday cake," Emma explained from her position at the kitchen table where she was carefully separating eggs. "But he can't remember if the recipe called for 1 cup or 1.5 cups of sugar." Lena's heart clenched. She'd known Michelle's birthday was coming up. The girls had mentioned it last week, but she hadn't realized they were planning to mark it this way. "It's 1 cup," Grace announced, wandering in from the living room with her tablet. "I found the recipe on Mom's old blog. See?" She held up the screen showing a cheerful post from years ago, complete with photos of a younger Michelle and 3 tiny toddlers covered in frosting. "Crisis averted," Evan said with relief, measuring out the sugar. He caught sight of Lena hovering in the doorway, and his expression softened. "Hey, didn't hear you come in." "I can go if this is a family thing." "Don't be ridiculous," Sophie interrupted before Evan could respond. "You're supposed to help with dinner anyway.
We're having tacos after we finish the cake. It's tradition, Emma added. Mom's favorite dinner on her birthday, and her cake for dessert. We do it every year. The casual inclusion in a ritual that was so deeply personal should have felt presumptuous, but the girls said it with such matter-of-fact acceptance that Lena found herself stepping forward instead of retreating. What can I do to help? The next 2 hours were a beautiful mess of cooking and baking and storytelling. The girls shared memories of their mother as they worked, how she always let them lick the beaters, even though it probably wasn't food safe, how she'd sing off-key while decorating cakes, how she'd once dropped an entire cake on the floor and they'd eaten it anyway, calling it floor cake like it was a special delicacy. Evan added his own stories, his voice warm with affection and grief in equal measure. And Lena listened, learning about the woman whose absence had shaped this family as much as her presence had. When the cake came out of the oven, slightly lopsided but smelling incredible, Grace turned to Lena with sudden seriousness. Do you think it's weird that we celebrate Mom's birthday even though she's not here? The question hung in the air, heavy with the kind of existential worry only children could articulate so plainly. I think it's beautiful, Lena said honestly. You're keeping her memory alive, making sure she's still part of your family even though she can't be here physically. Some of my friends think it's sad, Grace continued, like we can't move on or something. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting, Evan interjected gently. It means carrying the people we love with us while we keep living. Exactly, Sophie agreed. Mom wouldn't want us to just stop celebrating her like she never existed. That would be sad. They ate tacos at the dining table, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics, upcoming school events, Grace's latest artistic endeavor involving painted rocks, Sophie's campaign to start a recycling program at school. But Lena couldn't stop thinking about the cake cooling on the counter, about the ritual of remembrance these children had embraced with such healthy acceptance of both grief and joy. After dinner, they gathered around the cake, chocolate with vanilla buttercream frosting, decorated with slightly wobbly flowers that Grace had insisted on piping herself. Evan placed candles on top, one for each year Michelle would have been. Should we sing? Emma asked. Always, Evan said. They sang happy birthday to someone who couldn't hear them, and Lena felt tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. When the song ended, the girls each made a wish before blowing out candles, a tradition they'd apparently started the first birthday after Michelle died. Your turn, Dad, Sophie prompted. Evan closed his eyes, and Lena wondered what he was wishing for. When he opened them again, his gaze found hers across the table, and something passed between them that felt monumental and terrifying. Lena should make a wish too, Grace said. She's family. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding, all three girls said in unison, that eerie triplet synchronization that still caught Lena off guard sometimes. So Lena closed her eyes and made a wish, though it felt more like a prayer. Let me be worthy of this. Let me not mess this up. Let me be brave enough to stay. The cake was delicious, and the evening wound down into the comfortable routine of homework and baths and bedtime negotiations. Lena helped Emma practice her spelling words while Sophie read ahead in her English assignment, and Grace worked on a drawing that was supposedly for art class, but looked suspiciously like a portrait of the family, including Lena. Is that me? Lena asked, pointing to a figure with dark hair and green eyes. Obviously, Grace said. You're right between Dad and Emma. That's where you always sit at dinner. The observation was so casual, so accepted, that Lena had to excuse herself to the bathroom to collect herself. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, at this woman who'd spent so many years convinced she didn't deserve love, and tried to reconcile that person with the one Grace had drawn, someone who belonged, who had a place at the table, who was simply part of the landscape of this family's daily life. When she emerged, Evan was waiting in the hallway. You okay? He asked quietly. Yeah, Lena gestured vaguely toward the living room where the girls were. This is a lot sometimes. Too much? No, the opposite, actually. It's so much in the best way, and I keep waiting for it to feel overwhelming, but it just feels right. Evan stepped closer, his hand finding hers in the dim hallway. I'm glad you were here tonight, for Michelle's birthday. It felt important that you were part of it. The girls are incredible, Lena said, the way they've learned to hold both the grief and the joy together. That's not easy at any age, let alone 8. They learned it from their mother,
Michelle was always good at feeling everything fully, the hard stuff and the good stuff, without letting one cancel out the other. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I think that's why they've adapted to you so well. They know loving you doesn't mean replacing her. It's just expanding the circle. The words settled in Lena's chest, warm and solid. Can I ask you something? Anything. What did you wish for when you blew out the candles? Evan's smile was soft, almost shy. I wished for the courage to ask you something I've been thinking about for weeks. What's that? Move in with us. The words hung between them, simple and terrifying and perfect. Lena's heart started racing, her mind immediately jumping to all the reasons it was too soon, too much, too risky. I know it's fast, Evan continued, reading her panic with the accuracy of someone who'd learned her tells. And I know you're scared.
But your lease is up in January anyway, and you're here almost every night, and the girls have already cleared out half of Grace's closet because they're convinced you're going to say yes, and you'll need somewhere to put your clothes. They what? Sophie made a spreadsheet. It has your current living expenses versus what you'd save by splitting costs here, projected utility usage, and a timeline for gradual integration of your furniture. She's very thorough. Despite her panic, Lena laughed. Of course she did. You don't have to answer now. I just wanted to put it out there. Let you think about it. Evan's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. But for what it's worth, this already feels like your home to me, to all of us. We're just waiting for you to see it too. Before Lena could formulate a response, Grace's voice called out from the living room. Dad! Lena! We're ready for bedtime stories! We'll talk more later, Evan said, squeezing her hand before heading toward the living room. Lena followed in a daze, her mind spinning. Move in, with Evan and 3 8-year-old girls. Officially become part of this family she'd accidentally fallen into. Give up the safety of her own apartment, her own space, her escape route if everything fell apart. The bedtime routine was familiar now. All 3 girls piled into Sophie's bed because it was the biggest. Evan reading from whatever chapter book they were working through. Lena sitting in the corner chair watching this nightly ritual with something that felt dangerously close to belonging. Tonight it was the 4th Harry Potter book, and Evan did different voices for each character in a way that made the girls giggle and beg for just one more chapter. Bedtime is bedtime, he said firmly when they reached a good stopping point. Tomorrow we'll read more. The girls negotiated their way into one more glass of water and one final bathroom trip before finally settling into their respective beds. Lena helped tuck in Emma, who hugged her fiercely before letting go. I hope you say yes, Emma whispered. About moving in. We already made space for your books in the living room bookshelf. You're all very confident, Lena whispered back. Because we know you love us, and we love you, so it makes sense. The 8-year-old logic was irrefutable, and Lena found herself hugging Emma tighter before pulling back. Good night, sweetheart. Good night. Tell Dad not to forget to turn on my nightlight. Lena relayed the message to Evan, who was in the middle of negotiating with Grace about whether stuffed animals needed to be tucked in separately. They're not real, Grace. They don't get cold. But they have feelings. Stuffed animals don't have feelings. How do you know? Have you ever been a stuffed animal? Evan looked at Lena helplessly. A little backup here? I think the stuffed animals should be tucked in, Lena said solemnly. Better safe than sorry. Traitor, Evan muttered, but he dutifully tucked in the small army of plush toys surrounding Grace. When all 3 girls were finally settled, Lena and Evan retreated to the living room. The house felt different at night when the chaos had settled, more intimate somehow. They sat on the couch, and Evan pulled her against his side in a gesture that had become natural over the past months. You don't have to give me an answer tonight about moving in, he said into the comfortable silence. I just wanted you to know that the option is there, that we want you here. Permanently. Lena rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, sawdust and laundry detergent and something uniquely Evan. I want to say yes, she admitted quietly, but I'm terrified. Of what specifically? Of everything. Of moving too fast and ruining what we have. Of the girls getting sick of having me around all the time. Of you realizing that living with someone who's deaf is harder than just dating them. Of... She stopped, the biggest fear catching in her throat. Of me leaving, Evan finished for her. Yeah. Lena, look at me. When she did, his eyes were steady and sure. I'm not going anywhere. I know you've been burned before, and I know that fear doesn't just disappear because I say nice words. But I need you to understand something. When I asked you to move in, I wasn't asking you to try out living here. I was asking you to build a life here. With me. With the girls, a real, permanent life. How can you be so sure? Because I've already lost someone I loved more than anything. I know what that feels like, what it costs, and I wouldn't risk putting my daughters through that kind of loss again if I wasn't absolutely certain about you. About us. The words should have felt like pressure, but instead they felt like permission. Permission to trust, to hope, to believe that this time really could be different. Can I think about it? Lena asked. Not because I don't know what I want, but because I need to process it without panicking. Take all the time you need. But while you're thinking, remember that this isn't just my decision or your decision. The girls have already voted, and it was unanimous. Sophie's spreadsheet was that convincing? Sophie's spreadsheet was terrifying. She had projections through the next 5 years, including estimated costs of potential future pets and projected grocery expenses as you all get older. Despite everything, Lena laughed. She really is something else. They all are. And they're yours, Lena. Whether you live here or not, you're theirs and they're yours. Moving in just makes it official. They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer before Lena reluctantly said she should head home. Evan walked her to her car, kissing her goodnight with a sweetness that made her chest ache. Think about it, he said, but not too hard. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that scare us most. The drive back to her apartment felt longer than usual, Lena's mind racing with possibilities and fears in equal measure. She'd spent so many years protecting herself, building walls, maintaining escape routes. The idea of dismantling all of that, of making herself truly vulnerable by committing to this family, was terrifying. But as she parked in her apartment complex and climbed the stairs to her unit, she realized something. She was already vulnerable, already invested, already so deeply entangled in the lives of Evan and his daughters that losing them would devastate her whether she lived with them or not. The only difference would be whether she'd let herself fully experience the joy of belonging before that hypothetical loss, or whether she'd held back trying to protect a heart that was already wholly given. Her apartment felt empty in a way it never had before. The silence that had once been peaceful now felt hollow. She looked around at her carefully curated space, everything chosen to be hers alone, no compromises, no shared decisions, and realized it no longer felt like home. Home was a house full of noise and laughter, and 3 girls who argued about everything, and a man who looked at her like she hung the moon. Lena pulled out her phone and typed a message to Rachel. I think I'm going to do something absolutely terrifying. Rachel's response came immediately. Finally, I was wondering when you'd get there. How did you know? Because I've watched you fall in love with that family for months, and I've watched you fight it every step of the way. I'm just glad you're finally done fighting. I'm still scared. Good. Means it matters. Now go get your happy ending before you overthink yourself out of it. Lena set down her phone and looked around her apartment one more time. Tomorrow she'd call her landlord about not renewing the lease. Tomorrow she'd start the terrifying, exhilarating process of dismantling her carefully constructed solitary life and building something new. But tonight, she let herself sit with the fear and the hope and the absolute certainty that she was making the right choice, even if it scared her senseless. The next morning, Lena woke to a text from Sophie. Dad says you need time to think about moving in. How much time? We have a calendar, and we need to plan. She smiled at the phone, typing back, What if I said I don't need time? What if I said yes? The response was instantaneous. Really? Really? But we need to talk details. This is a big change. Sophie's already making a list. She's been making lists for 3 weeks just in case you said yes. We'll talk tonight at dinner. Dad's making his special lasagna, the celebration kind. How did he know I'd say yes? Because you love us. Duh. The simple confidence of it made Lena laugh out loud. These children who'd decided weeks ago that she belonged, who'd planned for her arrival with spreadsheets and cleared closet space, an unshakable faith that love was enough to build a life on. She spent the day in a daze, teaching her students while her mind spun with logistics and emotions.
Marcus noticed her distraction and asked if she was okay, and Lena found herself signing that she was more than okay. She was happy in a way that still felt new and fragile. When she arrived at Evan's house that evening, at home she corrected herself, at her home, the girls were waiting on the front porch like a welcoming committee. "You said yes," Grace shrieked, launching herself at Lena before she'd even made it up the walkway. "I said yes," Lena confirmed, catching Grace and spinning her around. "But we have a lot to figure out." "Sophie made lists," Emma said, holding up what appeared to be a 3-ring binder. "She's been very thorough." "I can imagine." They went inside to find Evan in the kitchen, his back to them as he worked at the stove. When he turned and saw Lena's face, his entire expression transformed. "You said yes," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I said yes. I'm terrified, and I'm probably going to panic at least 6 times between now and January, but I said yes." Evan crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms and lifting her off her feet in a hug that felt like coming home. The girls cheered and danced around them, and for a moment everything was perfect chaos and joy. When Evan set her down, he kept his hands on her waist, his eyes searching hers. "You're sure?" "I'm sure I want this. I'm sure I love you and the girls more than I've ever loved anything. I'm sure that even though I'm scared, staying is braver than running. So yeah, I'm sure." "She loves us," Grace announced to her sisters. "She said it out loud." "We knew that already," Sophie said with the long-suffering tone of someone stating the obvious. "But it's nice to hear it confirmed. Now can we go over the moving timeline? I have questions about furniture integration." Dinner was a celebration, the special lasagna and garlic bread, and a cake that Evan had apparently hidden in the garage just in case. They talked logistics and timelines, Sophie's spreadsheet proving remarkably comprehensive. They'd move Lena's furniture gradually over December, the girls helping pack and decide what stayed and what went to donation. Her lease ended January 5th, and they'd plan a big moving day with pizza and a sleepover to christen her official residency. "We should have a ceremony," Emma suggested, "like a welcoming ritual." "What kind of ritual?" Lena asked, amused. "I don't know. Maybe we all say what we're excited about, and then we plant a tree or something to symbolize growth?" "We're not planting a tree in January," Evan said. "The ground is frozen." "Fine, we'll plant it in spring, but we should still do the saying what we're excited about part." So they did, right there at the dinner table, sticky with lasagna sauce and giddy with change. Emma was excited to have help with her reading homework without having to wait for Dad to finish with her sisters. Sophie was excited to have another adult to discuss advanced topics with, since Dad sometimes didn't understand her scientific explanations. Grace was excited to have someone who appreciated her art without trying to make it more realistic. "What are you excited about, Dad?" Sophie asked. Evan looked at Lena, and his smile was soft and private. "I'm excited to wake up every morning knowing you're here. I'm excited to build a life with you. I'm excited to see what our family looks like when we're all together under one roof." "Your turn, Lena," Grace prompted. Lena took a breath, looking around the table at these 4 people who'd somehow become her whole world. "I'm excited to stop being scared all the time. I'm excited to belong somewhere, to someone. I'm excited to be part of this beautiful, chaotic, perfect family." "Group hug," Grace declared, and suddenly Lena was surrounded by arms and laughter and the overwhelming certainty that she'd made the right choice. That night, after the girls were in bed and she and Evan were cleaning up the kitchen, Lena felt the familiar flutter of panic start to rise. What had she just committed to? What if she couldn't do this? What if— "Hey," Evan said gently, turning off the faucet and taking her hands. "What's happening in that head of yours?" "Just the usual terror that I've bitten off more than I can chew." "Want to know a secret?" He pulled her closer. "I'm terrified too. I haven't lived with anyone since Michelle died. I don't know how to share space again, how to compromise on the little things, how to make room for someone new in routines we've had for years." "That's not helping," Lena said, but she was smiling. "But here's the thing. We're going to figure it out together. We're going to make mistakes and have arguments about stupid stuff like who left the dishes in the sink or whose turn it is to take out the trash. And we're going to learn how to be a family that includes you, not just as a visitor, but as a permanent member. It's going to be messy and complicated and sometimes really hard." Again, not helping, but it's also going to be worth it.
Because at the end of every hard day, I get to come home to you. The girls get to have you here, not just visiting, but staying. We get to build something together that's ours, all 5 of us. Lena leaned into him, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. I love you, she said quietly. I don't think I've actually said that out loud to you before. You said it earlier when you told the girls. That's not the same as saying it to you, so I'm saying it now. I love you, Evan Brooks. I love your daughters. I love the life we're building. And I'm choosing to trust that it's real, even when I'm scared. Evan's arms tightened around her. I love you too. Have since that first date when you ran away and then came back. Maybe even before, when Caroline first told me about you, and I felt something shift in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet kitchen, making silent promises about the future they were choosing to build together. From upstairs came a loud thump, followed by giggling. They're supposed to be asleep, Evan sighed. They're probably eavesdropping. Definitely eavesdropping. Should we do something about that? Probably. But I'm comfortable here. Another thump, more giggling. Girls! Evan called up the stairs. Bed! Now! We're in bed, came Sophie's voice, completely unconvincing. In bed does not mean jumping on beds and spying on adults. We're not spying, we're being interested in our family dynamics. Lena started laughing, couldn't help it. This was her life now. This chaos, this joy, this absolutely insane family that had claimed her as their own. Welcome home, Evan said, kissing her forehead. It only gets crazier from here. I'm counting on it, Lena replied, and meant every word. December arrived with the kind of cold that made everything feel sharper, more immediate. Lena spent her weekends boxing up her apartment while the girls helped in ways that were more enthusiastic than efficient. Grace insisted on wrapping every single item in bubble wrap, regardless of whether it was fragile. Emma wanted to read every book before it went into boxes to make sure Lena wasn't accidentally donating anything important. And Sophie had created a color-coded labeling system so complex that even she sometimes forgot what the codes meant. The blue dot means kitchen essentials, green is books, yellow is winter clothes, and red is miscellaneous, Sophie explained for the 3rd time, affixing stickers to boxes with the precision of a surgeon. What's the purple dot? Lena asked, pointing to a box that Sophie had just labeled. Sophie paused. I forgot I made purple. What's in that box? Picture frames and some decorative things. Okay, purple is sentimental items, sentimental. I'll update the master list. Evan appeared in the doorway of Lena's bedroom carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking amused. How's it going in here? Your daughter has created an organizational system that requires a decoder ring, Lena said, accepting the coffee gratefully. That sounds about right. Sophie, maybe we simplify and just write what's in the box on the box. Sophie looked scandalized. Dad, that's so inefficient. What if we need to find something specific? The color coding allows for categorical searching. We're moving across town, not entering witness protection. I think we can handle writing kitchen stuff on the boxes. The girls had started sleeping over at Lena's apartment some weekends, practicing what they called family bonding in the new space, even though Lena kept reminding them it wasn't a new space, it was her old space that she was leaving. But the girls had declared that anywhere they were all together was family space, and Lena had learned to pick her battles. On one such sleepover, Grace woke up crying from a nightmare. Lena heard her first, found her tangled in blankets on the air mattress in the living room, tears streaming down her face as she signed frantically. Sweetheart, slow down, Lena signed back, gathering Grace into her arms. I can't understand when you go so fast. Grace took a shaky breath and signed more carefully. I dreamed you left, that you decided you didn't want to be our family anymore, and you went away like Mom did. Lena's heart broke. She hadn't considered that the girls might be processing their own fears about her moving in, their own worries about loss and abandonment wrapped up in this change they'd claimed to be so excited about. Oh, Grace, I'm not going anywhere. I'm moving in with you, remember? We're going to be together all the time. But what if you change your mind? Grace's hands trembled as she signed. What if you get tired of us or Dad makes you mad and you leave? Come here. Lena pulled Grace fully onto her lap,
wrapping her in the kind of fierce hug that spoke louder than words. When she pulled back, she made sure Grace could see her face clearly in the dim light from the hallway. People leave sometimes, and I know that's scary because your mom left even though she didn't want to, but I'm not leaving. Not when things get hard, not when we disagree, not when you drive me crazy with questions at 6 in the morning. I'm staying. How do you know? How can you promise that? Because I love you. All three of you and your dad. And love means showing up even when it's hard. It means choosing to stay. Grace was quiet for a moment, processing. Mom used to say that too, that love was a choice you made every day. Your mom was right. Do you miss having your own space, where it's quiet and you don't have to deal with us? The question was so vulnerable, so achingly honest, that Lena had to take a moment to answer properly. Sometimes I miss the quiet, she admitted, because lying would help no one. But you know what I miss more when I'm here alone? Your laugh. Sophie's random science facts at dinner. Emma's stories about every single thing that happened at school. Your dad's terrible jokes. The noise isn't just noise, Grace. It's life. It's family. And I'd choose that over quiet any day. Grace burrowed back into Lena's arms, and they sat like that until her breathing evened out into sleep. When Lena tried to move her back to the air mattress, Grace's hands gripped tighter. Stay, she mumbled, half asleep. So Lena stayed, holding an 8-year-old who'd already lost too much and was brave enough to love again anyway. When Evan arrived to pick up the girls the next morning and found them still curled together on the couch, his expression went soft with something that looked like wonder. She had a nightmare, Lena explained quietly, careful not to wake Grace. And you stayed with her? Of course I stayed with her. Michelle used to do that, spend the whole night on the couch if one of them couldn't sleep alone. He sat down on the coffee table, looking at his youngest daughter peaceful in Lena's arms. They're going to have moments like this, moments where they're scared or grieving or processing things we can't fully understand. It's not always going to be easy. I know. And you're still sure about all of this. Lena looked down at Grace, then up at Evan. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The official moving day was January 6th, a Saturday that dawned bright and bitterly cold. Caroline showed up with her truck and 3 of Evan's construction crew who'd volunteered to help. Rachel arrived with coffee and bagels and a playlist she'd titled Lena's New Chapter that was embarrassingly sentimental. The girls had made signs that said, "Welcome home, Lena," with so much glitter they'd probably be finding it in corners for years. The actual moving took less time than expected since Lena had been gradually transferring things for weeks. By early afternoon, her apartment was empty except for cleaning supplies, and her furniture was integrated into the Brooks house with surprising ease. Her couch fit perfectly in the living room. Her bookshelf found a home in the corner that had always looked empty. Her dishes mixed with theirs in the kitchen cabinets, different patterns creating new combinations that somehow worked. This is weird, right? Rachel said, standing in what used to be Lena's bedroom and was now just an empty room with marks on the walls where furniture used to be. Like, good weird, but weird. Totally weird, Lena agreed. I keep thinking I should feel more anxious about this. But you don't? But I don't. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Rachel pulled her into a hug. I'm so proud of you for being brave enough to try this. I'm terrified I'm going to screw it up. You won't. And even if you do make mistakes, you've got a whole family who's chosen you. They're not going to give up on you just because things get hard. Back at the house, chaos reigned as everyone tried to find places for the last of Lena's belongings. Caroline was arguing with Evan about the best configuration for the living room furniture. The construction guys were helping the girls hang pictures in Lena's new room, which was technically Evan's room but was now officially theirs. Rachel was organizing the kitchen with Sophie's help, which mostly consisted of Sophie explaining why Rachel's organizational system was suboptimal. This is insane, Lena said to no one in particular, surveying the controlled chaos. This is family, Emma corrected, appearing at her elbow. Come on, we need your opinion on where to hang Mom's picture. Lena followed Emma upstairs to find Grace and the construction guys debating the placement of a framed photo of Michelle. It showed her laughing, surrounded by 3 tiny toddlers, her hands frozen mid-sign in a moment of pure joy. Grace thinks it should go in the hallway, one of the guys explained, but I think it's too high up there. Where do you think it should go, Lena?
Grace asked. The question felt loaded with significance. This was Michelle's house first, her space, her family. And now Lena was moving into it, rearranging furniture and hanging her own pictures alongside memories of someone irreplaceable.
I think, Lena said carefully, it should go wherever you three want it. This is your mom, and you get to decide where you want to see her picture. But you live here now too, Emma pointed out. You should have a say. How about we put it at the top of the stairs, Sophie suggested, joining them. That way everyone sees it every day, but it's not like we're hiding her or making a shrine. It's just part of the house. The other girls considered this and nodded. The picture went up at the top of the stairs, and Lena found herself standing in front of it, studying the woman whose absence had shaped this family. She would have liked you, Caroline said, appearing beside Lena. Michelle, she had a thing for people who didn't take Evan's nonsense. I've heard that before. Because it's true. She'd also appreciate how you've loved her girls, not trying to replace her, just adding to what she started. Caroline paused. I know this is strange, moving into her house, building a life in the space she left behind. It is strange, but also right, somehow. Good. Because those girls deserve someone who chooses them every day, and Evan deserves someone who sees him as more than just a widower or a single dad. He deserves someone who loves him for who he is now, not who he was before. The afternoon faded into evening, and gradually the helpers dispersed. Caroline left with promises to have them all over for dinner soon. Rachel extracted promises from Lena to call if she needed anything, even if it was just to vent. The construction guys declined Evan's offer of beer and pizza, citing early mornings and understanding smiles. Finally, it was just the five of them, Lena, Evan, and three girls who were vibrating with excitement about their first official night as a complete family. Pizza, Grace announced. We have to order pizza. That's what you do on moving day. Grace, we literally had pizza 3 days ago, Evan said. That was regular pizza. This is ceremonial pizza, totally different. They ordered pizza because arguing with Grace about food traditions was a losing battle. While they waited for delivery, the girls gave Lena a tour of the house as if she hadn't been there hundreds of times before, pointing out which drawer was now hers in the bathroom, where her coffee mugs lived in the kitchen, how they'd rearranged the coat closet to make room for her jackets. And this is your room, Sophie said, pushing open the door to what had been Evan's room and was now theirs. We didn't change too much because we figured you'd want to arrange it yourself, but we did clear out half the closet and 3 of the dresser drawers. The room looked the same, but different. Lena's things were scattered among Evan's, her books on the nightstand, her jewelry box on the dresser, her robe hanging on the back of the door. It was intimate and domestic and absolutely terrifying in its permanence. What do you think? Emma asked anxiously. Is it okay? It's perfect, Lena managed, her throat tight. Good, because we worked really hard on making space. Dad had so many old t-shirts that he never wore, and Sophie made him donate like 20 of them. They were perfectly good shirts, Evan protested from the doorway. They had holes, Dad, Sophie said. Multiple holes. That's not perfectly good. That's perfectly holy. Did you just make a pun? I've been waiting 3 weeks to use it. Dinner was pizza consumed in the living room while sitting on furniture that was now a blend of Lena's and the Brooks family's things. The girls argued about what movie to watch for their ceremonial first night. Evan tried to mediate while also trying to stop Grace from eating an entire large pizza by herself. It was chaos and noise and absolutely perfect. When the girls were finally in bed, a process that took twice as long as usual due to their excitement, Lena and Evan collapsed onto the couch together. First night, Evan said, pulling her against his side. How are you feeling? Overwhelmed, happy, terrified, all of it at once. That sounds about right. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Thank you for doing this, for being brave enough to try. I'm not sure brave is the right word, more like too stubborn to let fear win. Whatever the reason, I'm glad you're here. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Lena said quietly, I keep expecting to panic, keep waiting for that voice in my head to start listing all the reasons this won't work. But it's not coming. Maybe you've finally convinced it that some things are worth the risk. Maybe. She turned to look at him. Or maybe I've just found people who make me want to be braver than my fears.
The next weeks were an adjustment in ways both expected and unexpected. Lena learned that Evan was incapable of putting dishes directly into the dishwasher. He'd set them on the counter right next to the dishwasher, but never actually in it. The girls discovered that Lena was extremely grumpy before her morning coffee and learned to give her a wide berth until she'd had at least one cup. There were arguments about bathroom schedules and whose turn it was to take out the trash and whether the thermostat setting was reasonable or tyrannical. But there were also mornings when Lena woke up to Emma reading quietly in the corner of the bedroom, not wanting to disturb but also not wanting to be alone. Evenings when Sophie would seek her out to explain a complex scientific concept she'd learned, trusting Lena to understand in ways others didn't. Moments when Grace would climb into her lap without warning, signing random observations about life with the kind of trust that took Lena's breath away. And there was Evan, who learned her rhythms and moods with the attention of someone truly committed to understanding her, who knew when she needed space and when she needed closeness, when to push and when to let her retreat and regroup, who made her coffee exactly how she liked it and never made her feel guilty about needing quiet time after particularly draining days with her students. February brought Valentine's Day, which the girls approached with the kind of strategic planning usually reserved for military operations. "We need to make it special," Sophie said at an emergency family meeting she'd called, "because this is Lena's first Valentine's Day as part of the family." "I thought we could make cards," Emma suggested, "like we used to do with Mom." There was a brief silence, the kind that still sometimes fell when someone mentioned Michelle in a way that highlighted the before and after of their family structure. "I think that's a perfect idea," Lena said, her voice gentle. "Your mom started a beautiful tradition. We should keep it going." So they made cards, all 5 of them sitting around the dining table with construction paper and markers and enough glitter to constitute an environmental hazard. The girls made cards for each other and for Evan and for Lena, their messages ranging from sweet to silly to surprisingly profound. Evan made cards with the artistic skill of someone who worked with his hands but had no talent for fine motor crafts, and they were charmingly terrible. Lena made cards for each of the girls, taking time to write personal messages about what she loved about each of them. For Sophie, her brilliant mind and organizational skills, and the way she cared for her sisters even when she pretended to be annoyed. For Emma, her gentle heart and love of stories, and the way she saw the good in everyone. For Grace, her fierce spirit and creative soul, and the way she lived life at full volume without apology. For Evan, she wrote something simpler but deeper. "Thank you for teaching me that love doesn't count the cost, that staying is braver than running, that family is something you build together, one day at a time. I love you." When they exchanged cards on Valentine's Day morning, there were tears and laughter and Grace's declaration that they should do this every month, not just on Valentine's Day. "That would defeat the purpose of it being special," Sophie pointed out. "But we could make it special every month. We could have different themes." "Grace, that's just crafts night. We already have crafts night." "But this would be cards night, totally different." That evening, after the girls were in bed, Evan presented Lena with a small box. "This isn't," he started, then stopped. "Okay, let me say this right. This isn't what you might think it is, but it's important, and I need you to understand what it means." Lena opened the box to find a key. Not the house key he'd already given her, but something older, more worn. She looked at him questioningly. "That was Michelle's," Evan explained quietly. "The key to her art studio. After she died, I locked it up because the girls weren't ready to go through her things. And honestly, neither was I. But lately, I've been thinking that maybe it's time. Maybe we could turn it into something new while still honoring what it was." "Evan, I can't. Let me finish. I'm not asking you to erase Michelle or take over her space. I'm asking if you want to help us transform it into something we can all use. Maybe an art studio for Grace or a reading room for Emma or whatever we decide together. But I want you to have this key because you're part of this family now, and that means you're part of all of it, the past and the present and the future we're building." Lena closed her hand around the key, feeling the weight of the trust Evan was placing in her. "Are the girls okay with this?" "It was their idea. Sophie brought it up last week.
said it seemed wasteful to have a whole room that no one used, and that maybe Mom would want it to be something that brought us joy instead of sadness. When did she get so wise? I ask myself that every day. The following weekend, they opened Michelle's studio together. The girls went in first, looking around at their mother's things with the complicated expressions of children processing grief. There were canvases in various stages of completion, art supplies organized with the same precision Sophie had inherited, and photos pinned to a board showing the girls at various ages. I forgot how much stuff she had, Emma said softly.
Can we keep some of it? Grace asked. Like maybe her brushes? I could use them for my art.
I think your mom would love that, Evan said. They spent the afternoon sorting through Michelle's things with care and reverence. Some pieces they kept, her favorite brushes for Grace, her sketchbooks for Emma to read, her color theory books for Sophie to study. Others they donated to the local arts center, knowing Michelle would have wanted them used rather than gathering dust. And slowly, the studio transformed from a shrine to a memory into a space that could hold both the past and the future. What should we make it? Emma asked when most of Michelle's things had been sorted. An art room, Grace said immediately. A reading room, Emma countered. A study space, Sophie suggested. Or, Lena said carefully, it could be all of those things. A creative space for whatever anyone needs. Grace's art supplies in one corner, bookshelves and reading chairs for Emma, a desk for Sophie's projects. A family space. The girls considered this and nodded their approval. Over the following weeks, they gradually transformed the studio into exactly that, a room that honored Michelle's creative spirit while serving the needs of their evolving family. Lena helped pick out furniture and organize supplies, always conscious of the delicate balance between being helpful and overstepping. One afternoon in late March, Lena was in the creative room helping Grace with an art project when Sophie appeared in the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" Sophie said, her expression unusually uncertain. "Of course." "Do you ever feel like you're trying to be Mom? Like you have to fill the space she left?" The question was so direct, so vulnerably honest, that Lena set down the paintbrush she was holding and gave Sophie her full attention. "No," she said truthfully. "I don't try to be your mom because I could never be her. She was her own person, and from everything you've told me, she was incredible. I'm just trying to be me. Lena, who loves your dad and loves you three, and is doing her best to be a good part of this family. But don't you feel weird, living in her house, taking care of her kids, sleeping in her room?" "Sometimes," Lena admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I have any right to be here, in the life she built. But then I remember that your dad chose me. You three chose me. And I'm not replacing anyone. I'm just adding something new to what already exists." Sophie was quiet, processing. "I'm glad you're here," she said finally. "But I also miss Mom sometimes, and I feel bad about being happy with you." "Oh, sweetheart," Lena pulled Sophie into a hug. "You can miss your mom and be happy with me at the same time. Those feelings don't cancel each other out. Love doesn't work like that." "That's what Dad says, too." "Your dad is a smart man." "Sometimes." Sophie pulled back, swiping at her eyes. "Thanks for not getting weird about me asking." "You can always ask me anything, even the hard questions, especially the hard questions." April brought warmer weather and the girls' 9th birthday. Evan and Lena planned a party that somehow ended up including 20 children, 3 different cake flavors because the girls couldn't agree, and an unfortunate incident involving a piñata and a broken window. "I'm never doing this again," Evan said, surveying the chaos of wrapping paper and sugar-hyped children. "You say that every year," Caroline reminded him. "This year, I mean it." "You said that last year, too." Lena was helping Emma open presents when Grace climbed onto her lap, exhausted from the excitement, but clearly having the time of her life. "This is the best birthday ever," Grace declared. "Better than last year when you went to the water park?" Lena asked. "Way better. Because you're here." The simple statement shouldn't have hit as hard as it did, but Lena found herself blinking back tears for what felt like the 100th time that day. As spring progressed into early summer, Lena realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, stopped bracing herself for rejection or disappointment. She'd settled into this life with a comfort that would have terrified her a year ago, and now it just felt like home. One evening in late May,
Evan asked her to go for a walk after dinner. The girls were doing homework, supervised by Caroline, who'd stopped by for dinner, and the weather was perfect, warm but not hot, with that golden late spring light that made everything look magical. They walked through their neighborhood, hand in hand, making small talk about their days. But Lena could sense Evan's nervousness, the way he kept starting to say something and then stopping. "What's going on?" she finally asked.
"You're being weird." "I'm not being weird. You're absolutely being weird. You've told me about the same construction problem 3 times, and I know you already told me because you keep apologizing for repeating yourself." Evan stopped walking, pulling her to a halt in front of a small neighborhood park. "Okay, I'm being weird. There's something I want to ask you, and I'm terrified of screwing it up." Lena's heart started racing. "Evan, wait, let me say this before I lose my nerve." He took both her hands in his. "When you walked out of that restaurant on our first date, I thought that was it. I thought I'd lost my chance at something real with you, but then the girls chased you down and you came back, and you've been coming back every day since. You've chosen us, me and the girls and this complicated, messy family, over and over again. Evan, what are you? I'm asking you to choose us one more time, permanently." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Lena's breath caught. "I know we've only been together for about 8 months. I know this is fast, but I also know that I've never been more certain about anything in my life. Lena Parker, will you marry me?" The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, standing in this park as the sun set and the future hung in the balance. Lena's mind raced through 1,000 thoughts. It was too soon. They should wait. What if she screwed this up? What if... But underneath all the fear was something stronger. Certainty. Love. The bone-deep knowledge that this man and his 3 daughters were her family, her home, her future. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll marry you." Evan's entire face transformed with joy and relief. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple band with 3 small stones, one for each of the girls, he explained, and pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise and a celebration all at once. When they pulled apart, both laughing and crying, Lena realized they had an audience. Caroline and the 3 girls were standing at the edge of the park, having clearly followed them, all wearing identical expressions of gleeful triumph. "You knew," Lena said to the girls. "You all knew he was going to propose." "Obviously," Sophie said. "We helped pick out the ring." "And we've been planning the wedding for 3 weeks," Emma added. 3 weeks? He just proposed 30 seconds ago." "We were optimistic," Grace said with a shrug. "Also, you were definitely going to say yes. It was obvious." They spent the rest of the evening celebrating, Caroline breaking out champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for the girls. The girls showed Lena their wedding planning binder, because of course there was a binder. Sophie had made a binder, complete with color schemes and venue suggestions and a detailed timeline for the next year. "We thought a spring wedding would be nice," Sophie explained. "That gives us a year to plan, which is reasonable but not too long. And we could do it at the Botanical Gardens. They have a beautiful ceremony space." "We could have a chocolate fountain," Grace added, "and a photo booth. Emma wants doves, but I think that's too much." "Doves are traditional," Emma protested. "Doves are messy. They poop everywhere." As the girls debated the merits of various wedding elements, Evan pulled Lena aside. "I should have warned you," he said. "They've been planning this for a while. I think they're more excited about the wedding than we are." "I don't think that's possible," Lena said, looking at her ring in the fading light. "Evan, this is beautiful. The 3 stones, one for each of the girls, because they're as much a part of this proposal as I am. You're not just marrying me, you're marrying all of us." "I know, and I can't wait." The next year passed in a blur of wedding planning and daily life. The girls were heavily involved in every decision, from the color of the bridesmaid dresses — they'd insisted on being bridesmaids — to the flavor of cake to the music for the reception. Lena let them take the lead on most of it, recognizing that this wedding was as much about blending a family as it was about her and Evan making a commitment. There were hard moments too. A panic attack in November when Lena convinced herself she was making a mistake, that she'd ruin everything, that she should run while she still could. Evan talked her down with patience and love, and the girls made her a card that said, "You're stuck with us now," with drawings of them all holding hands. Christmas brought its own challenges as they navigated their first major holiday season as an engaged family. But they created new traditions while honoring old ones, and slowly Lena learned that she could hold space for both Michelle's memory and her own place in this family. Spring arrived again, bringing with it the wedding they'd spent a year planning. The botanical gardens were in full bloom, perfect for the outdoor ceremony the girls had insisted on. Lena's students had made decorations, colorful paper flowers and chains that added a whimsical touch. Rachel stood as maid of honor, and Caroline had helped coordinate the whole event with military precision. But it was the girls who stole the show, walking down the aisle before Lena in matching lavender dresses, each carrying a small bouquet. They stood beside Evan during the ceremony, part of the wedding party because they were part of the marriage itself. When it came time for vows, Evan spoke first, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. Lena, when we met, I was a man who'd learned to survive but had forgotten how to truly live. You taught me that it was okay to hope again, to love again, to build a future instead of just protecting the past. You've loved my daughters with a fierceness that takes my breath away, and you've loved me even when I was difficult or scared or stuck in my own way. I promise to choose you every day to face our fears together instead of alone, to build a family with you that's strong enough to weather any storm. Lena had written her vows and rewritten them a dozen times, but standing there with Evan's hands in hers and the girls watching with such hope and love, she abandoned her prepared speech. I spent so many years convinced I didn't deserve this, she said, her voice breaking, convinced that being deaf made me less worthy of love, that no one would want to deal with the complications of being with me. You proved me wrong every single day. You and these three incredible girls showed me that love doesn't count the cost, doesn't measure worthiness, doesn't keep score. You just show up and choose each other over and over again. I promise to keep showing up. I promise to be brave when I'm scared, to stay when running feels safer, to love all of you with everything I have. She turned to the girls, pulling them forward. Sophie, Emma, Grace, I'm not trying to replace your mother. I could never do that. But I promise to love you as fiercely as she did, to support your dreams, to show up for every school play and science fair and art show. I promise to be someone you can count on today and always. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even the officiant had to pause to collect himself before continuing with the ceremony. When they were pronounced married, Evan and Lena, officially a family, the girls cheered louder than anyone. The reception was exactly what they'd planned. Chaotic, joyful, full of laughter and dancing, and yes, a chocolate fountain that Grace immediately put to enthusiastic use. But the moment that mattered most came later in the evening, when the celebration was winding down and guests were starting to leave. Lena found herself standing with the girls, watching Evan talk to some of his construction crew. Can we tell you something? Sophie asked, and her sisters nodded seriously. Of course. We asked Dad to bring you to Romano's next Friday, Emma said. The restaurant where you had your first date. The one where I walked out on him? That's the one, Grace confirmed. We thought you should go back. Complete the circle or whatever. That's very thoughtful, but why? Because we want you to see how far you've come, Sophie interrupted. You walked out of that restaurant because you were scared and convinced you didn't deserve to be loved, but you came back that night, and you've kept coming back every day since. We think you should see where it all started, now that you know how the story turns out. Lena's throat was too tight to speak, so she just pulled all three girls into a hug, holding them close and marveling at how these children who'd started as strangers had become her whole world. The following Friday, Evan and Lena did return to Romano's. They sat at table 7, the same corner booth where it had all begun, and ordered the chicken marsala and ribeye they'd never gotten to finish that first night. Do you remember what you were thinking? Evan asked as they waited for their food, right before you decided to walk out. I was thinking that it was too good to be true, that there had to be a catch, that no one could actually be as kind and understanding as you seemed, that I should save us both the trouble and leave before you could hurt me. And now? Lena looked around the restaurant, at the table where 3 little girls had changed everything, at the man who'd refused to let her give up on happiness. Now I'm thinking that sometimes the scary choice is the right choice, that love is worth the risk, that I'm the luckiest person in the world to have found a family that chose me as much as I chose them. Their food arrived, Marcus the server recognized them and grinned. and they ate slowly, savoring both the meal and the moment. This was where it had started, where Lena's carefully constructed walls had first begun to crack. And now, sitting in the same booth with a ring on her finger and a future full of noise and chaos and love stretching out before her, she could finally appreciate the terrified woman who'd walked out that night. Because that woman had been brave enough to come back, brave enough to try, brave enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be happy. As they finished dinner and prepared to leave, Evan took her hand across the table. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For running after you that night, for letting the girls chase you down, for coming back over and over again, even when it scared you, for choosing us." "Thank you for making me worth chasing," Lena replied, "for seeing me, really seeing me, and deciding I was worth the effort." They walked out of Romano's hand in hand, heading home to three girls who were definitely not asleep, despite it being past bedtime, who were probably spying from upstairs windows and planning their next family adventure. Home to the life Lena had been too scared to dream of, but had found anyway. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive loudly or conveniently. Sometimes it shows up in the form of 3 8-year-old girls who refuse to let you believe you're unworthy. Sometimes it's a widowed father who learns your language not because he has to, but because he wants to. Sometimes it's the terrifying act of staying when every instinct screams to run. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, it's enough to build a life on, one day, one choice, one moment of courage at a time. Lena had spent so many years running from the possibility of pain that she'd nearly missed the possibility of joy. But she'd stopped running. She'd chosen to stay. And in staying, she'd found her family, her home, her happy ending that was really just a beginning. As they pulled into the driveway and saw 3 faces quickly disappear from the upstairs window, Lena squeezed Evan's hand and smiled. This was her life now, loud, chaotic, imperfect, and absolutely perfect all at once. And she wouldn't change a single moment of it.